Start. Good afternoon. I want all of us to please turn our cell phones to silent. You may notice board members accessing their laptops, phones, or other devices during the meeting. They're using their devices to access board meeting materials that are in electronic format. This is an official business meeting of the Medical Board of California, and as such, disruptions of the board's business will not be tolerated. We have designated time on the agenda for public comment and ask for public comment on each agenda item. I ask that you be respectful of the need to conduct the board's business. Should anyone disrupt the meeting, I will ask that person to conduct him or herself in such a manner that permits the board to transact its business. This meeting will be available via teleconference. Individuals listening to the meeting will have an opportunity to provide public comment and will be assisted by a moderator who will be facilitating the teleconference process. For those members of the public participating via teleconference, please wait until the moderator has introduced you before you make your comments. To request to make a comment during the public comment period, press *1. You will hear a tone indicating you are in the queue for comment. If you change your mind and do not want to make a comment, press *2. Assistance is available throughout the teleconference meeting. To request a specialist, press *0. Each person will be limited to 3 minutes per agenda item. However, that time frame may be subject to change depending upon the number of speakers on a topic. During agenda item 3, public comments on items not on the agenda, the board has limited public comment period for individuals on the teleconference to 20 minutes. In addition, public comment from individuals here at the meeting will also be limited to 20 minutes. Therefore, after 20 minutes, no further comments will be accepted. During public comments on any other agenda item, 10 minutes will be allowed for comments from individuals on the teleconference line and those in the audience. After 10 minutes, no further comments will be accepted. Business service staff will be assisting us with receiving the public comments via teleconference during this meeting. The board welcomes public comments on any item on the agenda, and it is the board's intent to ask for public comments prior to the board taking action on any agenda item. If for some reason we forget to ask for a public comment on an agenda item and you wish to speak on that item, please raise your hand or come forward and you will be recognized. I would like to request all speakers complete presenter slip so we can call you at the appropriate time, and that the record of this meeting can be full and complete. However, this is voluntary. Please give the speaker slip to Ms. Cruz Jones. I will do my best to call upon everyone who has supplied a slip for the agenda item and recognize those who wish to make a last minute comment. Want to make sure all speakers to please stay on topic and keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Today's meeting will be run according to the Open Meeting Act as required by law. We plan to end the meeting at 5:30 p.m. Are there any people in the audience to recognize him? Thank you. I would like to call the meeting to the order and ask Ms. Cruz Jones, please call roll call.
Dr. Bolat? Here. Dr. Hawkins?
Here.
Dr. Kraus?
Present.
Ms. Lawson? Dr. Levine? Dr. Lewis?
Present.
Ms. Pines? Here. Ms. Sutton-Wills? Here. Mr. Warmoth?
Here.
Ms. Wright? Dr. Yip?
Here.
Dr. Gonadev?
Here. Quorum is present. I'll be thrilled to go to the next item, election of officers. Ron, yes.
Yes. I'd like to nominate Denise Pines for the office of President of the Medical Board of California.
Are there any other nominations?
That office or not any other office?
No, just for president
For
right
president,
now, yeah. If there are no other nominations, nominations are closed for president. Ms. Cruz Jones, roll call, please. Oh.
A motion in a second? Second.
Yes. Okay. Any comments from the audience? Comments on the phone?
Any comments on the phone? Any comments on the phone?
No comments at this time.
Thank you. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bolat? Aye. Dr. Gonadev?
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Dr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Lawson? Aye. Dr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Pines?
Aye.
Ms. Sutton Wills?
Yes.
Is it that difficult?
Mr. Wormuth? Dr. Yip?
Aye.
Motion carries. Denise, congratulations.
Thank you.
Our condolences, either way. And I would like to ask the nominations for vice president.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Ron Lewis for Vice President of the Medical Board of California.
Okay, any other nominations? Nominations are closed. Any comments from the board? Comments from the audience? Yes, ma'am. You got the right.
Yes, for the office of Vice President, I'm sorry, who was it again that was nominated? I apologize.
Dr. Ron Lewis.
Yes, yes, thank you. So Dr. Lewis, sir, I was just wondering what your experience has been professionally working with working in clinics in low-income areas.
I'm sorry, this isn't a back and forth. You can make a public comment.
Right.
You have 3 minutes to make a public comment.
Oh, yes, thank you. I apologize. So, excuse me, sir. Certainly for the office of vice president, is it? For the office of vice president, I would just be concerned in general about the person, any person, in this case, Dr. Lewis, but any person being a vice president of the medical board. I'd be concerned if they don't have experience in racial diversity and in social justice. So that we can avoid racist malpractice. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the audience? Comments on the phone?
None at this time.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Dr. Bolat? Aye. Dr. Gonadev?
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Dr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Lawson? Dr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Pines?
Aye.
Ms. Sutton Wills?
Yes.
Mr. Wormuth? Ms. Wright?
Abstain.
Dr. Yip?
Aye.
Okay, it carries. And the last but not the least, I'd like to ask nomination for Secretary of the Medical Board of California. Dr. Hawkins.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Howard Kraus, Secretary.
Okay. Any other nominations? Yes, Ms. Wright.
I'd like to nominate Dr. Michelle Bowler.
Okay, so we got 2 nominations, Dr. Cross and Dr. Bolat as you president for next 30 seconds. I can tell you that both are great people. So, and I just want to make sure that even though it's publicly contested election, whoever wins, everybody works with them together. So I would ask each one of you to make a statement. Dr. Kraus, for 1 minute, and then Dr. Bollard.
Californians are fortunate to have a medical board and staff that are capable, diligent, and committed. As a board member, I have been fortunate to be surrounded and supported by great colleagues on this board. I believe we could select any 3 board members randomly to serve as our officers, and the result would provide excellent leadership. Nonetheless, I am pleased to have been nominated and have been pleased to have served this board and Californians in many capacities over the past 5 years, including co-chairing with Ms. Wright our Disciplinary Demographics Task Force, and with Ms. Lawson our Marijuana Task Force, chairing Panel B and our Licensing Committee, and serving on our Enforcement Committee, Public Outreach and Wellness Committee, and Executive Committee. I have attended 3 FSMB meetings at my own expense and have been appointed to and served on 2 national work groups, and I've had the honor to sit and serve as California's delegate to the FSMB House when our president was unable to attend. I have found that our colleagues from other state medical boards are eager to know our experiences and to share theirs with us. I would like to address real and perceived conflicts of interest. The first faced by each board member is that the appointment to the medical board is counter to the personal interests of any of us. As we expose ourselves to public criticism for perceived failings of the board, and as I have recently learned, when the board is sued, some of us are individually sued as members of the board, resulting in jeopardy to our personal and professional lives and jeopardy to our non-board member colleagues who may be associated with us outside of our duties to the board. Being mindful of my increasing service commitment to the board in 2016, I finished my service as CMA trustee. This year, I will be finishing my service on the board of the California Ambulatory Surgery Association. You know from prior recusals at board meetings that for many years, beginning prior to my appointment to the board, I had a small investment in a publicly traded naloxone company, and that following completion of my service on the Marijuana Task Force, I had made a small investment in a publicly traded Canadian cannabis company. Both of these investments have been sold, yielding a net small loss. I will not consciously choose engagement in activities which are contrary to the interests of the board or the interests of the people of California, and I invite questions regarding potential or perceived conflicts of interest. I seek election to secretary because I desire to provide greater service to our board and thus enable each of us to better serve the interests of the people of California. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kraus. Dr. Bollard.
Dr. Kraus. Well, thank you, and I echo what Dr. Kraus just said. Any one of us could step into any of these positions because this is a really talented board. So for those that don't know me, I'm a family physician who worked as a county doctor, worked in private corporation, and for nearly 20 years at the David Geffen School of Medicine, UCLA Health. I earned a full professorship at UCLA and served as Executive Vice Chair of the Department of Family Medicine and Executive Director of an international medical graduate program. These programs require that these physicians meet all requirements of U.S. physicians, and these immigrant physicians are providing services to health professional shortage areas where there's one doctor for every 3,000 patients, unlike where many of us practice, where there's one doc for every 300 to 400. And a few highlights. I've been involved with the Medical Board of California from the time I graduated as from residency, giving competency exams in the early days to doing expert reviews. And I was very thrilled to be appointed to this board and reappointed just this past month. I served under the LA County Supervisor Don Kanabe as his public health commissioner and was overseeing some 2 million individuals in his district. And I was selected to serve in the Joint Commission, an organization founded in the 50s by a surgeon with the goal of continuously improving healthcare for the public. I'm a member of the Executive Board of Directors of the Association of California Health Districts that is committed to promoting the role that health districts play in responding to specialized needs of communities to millions of Californians. And finally, I proudly serve on the Board of Directors of Beach City's Health District, which is among one of the largest preventive health agencies in the nation. So I'm a population health person, and I very much enjoy that. It is now a question of what does the medical board need to do over the next year to protect the health care of consumers to ensure the quality of health care? How do we proactively ensure we train a healthy and competent physician workforce who understands their role and who can communicate and advocate on behalf of patients? And finally, how do we help those doctors with years of experience adapt to the fast-paced changes brought about by advancing scientific knowledge and technology? And with that, I want to say we are a team. Whomever is chosen, I remain ready, willing, and able to assist our new leadership in any way I can. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Boland. Any comments from the board? Comments from the audience? Comments on the phone?
Any comments on the phone?
Yes. Caller 1, your line is open.
Go ahead, please.
Is that me?
Yes, you are on the line.
Well, this is very strange. First of all, the sound is abysmally low. We can barely hear what's going on the phones. And the operator keeps butting in and explaining these instructions before every single agenda item. And she came on and said that this was going to be for public comment. So I didn't really intend to comment on this. But now that I'm here, I'll just say that it's a shame that both of these nominees have lawsuits pending against them right now. But I'm going to call in and say more about that in the next section. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Andrist. So before I roll call, I actually counted, we got 11 people. So it won't be tied. Let me put it that way. That was very important for me. And as I said, we love both of you and both are excellent candidates. So go ahead, roll call, please. Oh, what?
Break it up.
What? I'm sorry? Yes.
So I think what you can do is if you would name the candidate that you would like to be in that position, I think that would work, and then we would tally them at the end. If that's okay with the board, that's how we should move forward.
Yeah, David.
Just a point of information. What happens if it is a tie vote?
Don't know. That's what I was actually going to ask him. Then I counted 11. I said the chances of one abstaining and having a tie is small, I thought. So that's why I pointed out.
Not sure that abstention is a far-fetched possibility.
It's possible.
If we had a tie, I would assume that we would start over and ask for nominations again. And I mean, I don't know that we've ever had a tie before, and we've had contested elections. So I guess we can try it and see what happens. And if we have a tie at the end, then we can talk about how you want to move forward as a board.
Or avoid abstaining unless you actually have some conflict with the vote, which I can't imagine.
Ron?
I just have a suggestion. Is I thought one way of doing it, because it is a little, I think it's a little awkward, is to put our heads down and hold our hands up, and the public can see, and we can just vote that way.
Why?
But
Why?
Is it typical that we make a motion and then we see if that motion passes?
It's
Not with elections usually. See, it's the first time we've had to do a roll call vote for elections.
Okay.
So in the past, it's been a little bit easier when they've been contested, but now since we have to do a roll call vote under the Open Meeting Act, it is a bit odd to how to do it. But I mean, we can call one member first and then say all in support and not. But it just seems to me that you'd be doing that over again. So it just seems to me that if we call it and you just say the name of who your candidate is that you're supporting, and then we can count the votes at that point.
initially, one of the thoughts we had, Denise and I had, was a ballot where you write the name and tally, but we're told by our staff that nope, that doesn't work. It's a public meeting act and we have to publicly vote. That's the info I got. I mean, as far as I know, almost all elections are confidential, so, but this not. So, any other questions? Okay, if not, we're ready. Ms. Cruz Jones, roll call, please.
Dr. Bolat?
I say my name. A lot. Is that what we're doing? Yes, that's perfect.
Dr. Gonadev?
Cross.
Dr. Hawkins,
Kraus.
Dr. Kraus,
Kraus.
Ms. Lawson,
Bullock.
Dr. Lewis,
Bullock.
Ms. Pines,
Bullock.
Ms. Sutton Wells,
Bullock.
Mr. Warmoth,
Dr. Kraus.
Ms. Wright, Dr. Yip.
Dr. Kraus.
That's 6-5.
6-5 with Dr. Bolat winning secretary.
Dr. Bollard, congratulations. With this, I'll be happy to pass it on to the newly elected, freshly minted president, Miss Denise Pines. Denise.
Thank you. So first, Dr. Ganano Dev, we've been on the board since almost the very beginning, and so you've been very passionate throughout the whole time in the last 2 years. Your leadership and your passion as we've been working to really improve consumer protection with the board in a number of different areas, from just what we can do and what we have impact on directly as a board, as well as through the legislation. So I'm very excited that you're still staying on, so this isn't goodbye. This is just move over. But we know that passion will continue to guide us as we move into the next couple of years during the time that I will be president on the board. So we have something for you. We have your own gavel. So again, I'd like to thank you for your service.
Thank you, Denise. We've been friends for, since the day one she came on. And I thought it was right time for me to leave the job as the president, because last year it took a lot of toll on a lot of us to get the sunset done. I think it was almost the last few days where it got approved, and we got almost everything we wanted, dealing with Senate BNP, Assembly BNP, who weren't even talking to each other, and the governor's office. So it wasn't easy to get the sunset finished. We got it done. We got one or two little items remaining. One is VE, the other is probation notification, but everything else is done. Everything else is ready, including 3 years to get a license in California, which was very important for us for consumer protection. So I want to thank all my board members for trusting me to work with all these people. And more than anything else, I want to thank my vice president, who was always with me wherever we went, and my staff, who are amazing, without whose help we couldn't have gone this way. And some of them had a bet that sunset might not happen, but I said it will happen. So it's too bad that we didn't bet a drink or something. We would have won. But it happened. So with that, I'll thank you, and I'll stay on the board, and I'll help our newly elected leadership, whatever it takes to help. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Moving to agenda item 3, public comments on items not on the agenda. Before we invite speakers to come forward, I would like to ask individuals making comments to not discuss pending complaints, pending applications, or pending disciplinary actions that may come before the board for a decision. Such discussions are considered ex parte communications, as they could provide information to members that is outside of the record in violation of the Administrative Procedure Act. Therefore, such discussions could be in conflict and lead to a board decision being challenged in Superior Court. The board can receive comments regarding board's processes in general, but it cannot receive comments on specific cases or circumstances where decisions are still pending. Board staff is available to speak with you about any pending matter. In addition, the board would like the public to address the board as a whole and not to individual members. Please be aware that the public comment during this agenda item should provide information to the board members and is not a discussion between the board members and the public. The only action board members can take is to listen to comments and decide whether they want future action items at the times the board members, on items on a particular topic. No other action can be taken on an item at this meeting. Though this may seem at times like the board members are not being responsive, following these guidelines is critical to ensure the rules of the Open Meeting Act are followed to avoid compromising the speaker's goals or board's mission. I have the following speaker slips. Christina Higelbrand, am I saying that right? Please come forward.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me to speak. I spoke to the licensing board, and I just wanted to speak to the full board as well regarding medical exemption. So I should introduce myself first. I'm Christina Hildebrand. I'm from Voice for Choice Advocacy. We advocate and educate for transparency and informed choice for any product that goes into your body. Specifically today, I wanted to talk about SB 277 and the medical exemptions that are being written by our physicians in California. I'd like to start off with the fact that HHS has settled a lawsuit just recently with Robert F. Kennedy, in which they basically showed that they have not been doing the safety testing or safety overview on vaccines that was required of them the past 30 years since the 1986 Vaccine Injury Act, Children's Vaccine Injury Act. That act required Congress every 2 years to get a report from HHS with an overview of vaccine safety and the new vaccines on the market. The lawsuit basically showed that that report has not been done every 2 years, and so therefore there's a lack of safety for the vaccines. As many of you may be familiar, that 1986 Act removed all liability from vaccine manufacturers. There's no way to sue a vaccine manufacturer if you have a side effect from any vaccine in this country. You can go to the Vaccine Compensation Program, which is a no liability law court, but for that you have to have a severe adverse reaction, either anaphylactic shock within a certain time period or death. For anyone having any of the regular side effects which are noted on the package insert, which can include severe seizures, can include arthritis, can include a number of different side effects. For anyone who gets those, there's basically nothing that can be done. Our doctors in California, in order for children to get into school, are allowed to write medical exemptions, and Governor Brown made it very clear in his signing statement that medical exemptions was up to the discretion of the doctor, and that family medical history, including siblings, other family members, that their medical history should be taken into account. Now, our medical professionals, there are very, very few in this state that will actually write a medical exemption, even for patients that they have, that they absolutely clearly say, yes, you should never be vaccinated again. And the reason for that is that they are scared of losing their license. They're scared of the witch hunt that is going on. And so there are many medical doctors, I would say the majority of medical doctors in this state, that A, are not properly educated on what qualifies for a medical exemption. The most recent research, of which there is a lot coming out that has to do with autoimmune disorders, various other cancers and things that the vaccine ingredients are leading to, that is worldwide research.
Please conclude.
they're not being trained in that, and so they are not willing to give medical exemptions. But the biggest reason they're not willing to give medical exemptions, for completely legitimate reasons, is because they're scared. They're running scared. And as a patient and as a consumer, I ask you, the medical board, to really look out for us that have children who could be injured by vaccines because there is a genetic or family history, and really look for those doctors and make it clear to doctors that they can write medical exemptions and that they won't be sanctioned for doing so. I appreciate you listening to me. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Can Arthur Mirren come to the, thank you.
Okay, thank you. My name's Art Mirren. I'm a retired applied mathematician, having done research at Lawrence Livermore Laboratory for 44 years. I'm here to discuss myalgic encephalomyelitis, also known as chronic fatigue syndrome, commonly referred to as ME/CFS. For over 30 years, ME/CFS was treated as psychogenic and was highly stigmatized. HHS allocated few research dollars to investigate possible physical causes. Patients were referred to psychologists and told that their deconditioning was not due to physical disease and were often prescribed treatments that are now known to be harmful. In 2015, the National Academy of Medicine published a comprehensive report on ME/CFS, showing evidence of neurological, immunological, autonomic, and energy metabolism impairment. Among the Academy's findings were that 84 to 91% of patients were not yet diagnosed, and less than 1/3 of medical schools included ME/CFS in their curricula. Despite 3 years having passed, many family physicians are not familiar with ME/CFS. There are only a handful of recognized clinical care specialists in California, and harmful treatments are still being prescribed. In 2016, I co-authored a journal article establishing that ME/CFS disease burden exceeds that of HIV/AIDS and is over half that of breast cancer. In other words, ME/CFS is a mainline debilitating disease. Last year, the California State Legislature unanimously passed a resolution, SCR 40, urging support for ME/CFS at all government levels. I have met with the California Department of Public Health and advised to pursue funding through legislation. I formulated the California ME/CFS Initiative. Several of you have copies of that, and I'll be emailing for the rest of you. Legislation that focuses on education, training, and clinical care. Several of the provisions involve the Medical Board of California. I wish to open a dialogue with appropriate Medical Board personnel for their feedback and recommendations. I am hoping the Medical Board is willing to actively support steps in this direction, as those afflicted are in desperate need of treatment, and I really hope that this becomes an agenda item on future meetings. I'd like to thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Hannah Ree, please come to the table.
Yes, hello. I'm Hannah Ree, Dr. Ree. I'm a member of the CMA, as well as EMOS, Ethnic Medical Office Subcommittee, Organization Subcommittee. And I, like the other speaker, I had also presented a statement, but it's nice to be in front of the full board. So basically, I want to again stress the importance of diversity and understanding and tolerating and also practicing it, certainly within our medical practice. And so I'm very concerned that I'm very concerned that the medical experts that we're utilizing do not have any training, any experience experience in ethnic diversity, in caring for non-white patients, as evidenced on their extensive, impressive resume and their long career as a wonderful physician in the state of California. It seems that, and the reason may be severalfold. One is that there's no reason. Second could be we never thought it would be important. Number three could be it's not important. It's not important. It's not important to utilize medical experts who have training, experience, diversity, training, experience, and practice in community clinics, in free clinics, working with non-white patients. So as we kind of follow the lead that CMS has provided to us as far as what's going on with the budget, the federal budget, and the changes upon us with CMS, it's important. I would point out to the medical board that it would be wonderful. It'd be wonderful if we took the initiative and stepped up and stepped forward in recognizing the importance of diversity in our medical experts. And so that was one statement. And then also, the other statement, of course, is that, let's see. So I think that's it. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any comments on the phone? And if so, could we keep those comments to 3 minutes, please?
Yes. Caller 3, your line is now open. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, you're on the line.
Thank you. A board-certified plastic surgeon I was referred to by my doctor for a breast reduction removed my gluteus, infragluteal ligaments, parts of my hamstrings, lower lateral legs, and more, without need, consent, or rationale. He cut me in dozens of muscular zones, stabbed my sciatic notch, knee joints, IT bands, and hip bones, leaving me no padding in many places. The remaining tissues grew larger. I wasn't a candidate for what he did. I was 5'2", athletic, at my perfect muscular weight and fitness with some skin ptosis, yet he removed 6 pounds of needed tissue, destroyed my myofascial structure, systemic health, and botched my breasts. What he did was egregious and didn't match the paperwork on what we talked about in consultation. His medical records are inept, fabricated, and misleading. He performed a substantially different procedure for which consent was not obtained, which is a clear case of battery. That's from Cobb's first grant. He did not get my consent for using power-assisted liposuction. Leaving me disabled, disfigured, destitute, and in physical agony wasn't enough for this guy. He began a smear campaign on me, tried to get me to sign an under-limit settlement agreement and gag clauses, and slandered me and lied in court. He's deceitful, unskilled, has hurt others I know of, and is a clear danger to the public. There are at least 3 liposuction port marks on each buttocks, yet in court, the offending surgeon denied that he operated on my buttocks. This man is not fit to be a surgeon. The Medical Board of California has a statutory required mission to prioritize public safety above any other value or goal, but yet you didn't prosecute this dangerous surgeon who mutilated me when I opened the case. I sent you a lot of evidence then and even more recently. Senator Jerry Hill said failure by the California Medical Board to meet this goal in each case is egregious and legally, ethically, and morally unacceptable. How do you think the other women who have been harmed by this reckless surgeon will feel when they learn that the medical board could have prevented their harm if you had acted on the seriousness of my complaint years ago? Part of the offending surgeon's highly paid defense team was a TV reality show surgeon who reviews cases for your board. In trial, the TV surgeon represented himself as speaking for the Medical Board of California as he supported the actions of the negligent surgeon who assaulted me. I've sent evidence from the court transcripts to Jerry Hill's office and the Office of Business and Professions. If you care about public safety and fulfill your required mission, you will reopen this case and permanently revoke the license of the grossly negligent, cruel surgeon who battered me and shows no remorse. It also goes against public safety for the medical board to employ the corrupt TV show surgeon who lied at my trial using the name of the medical board to sway a jury. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the phone?
Yes. Caller 1, your line is now open.
I guess that's me. I guess they're calling us by numbers now. It's Eric Andrus. First, President Pines, I want to say that even when the public does ask for things to be placed on the agenda, it almost never is. I've asked for the topic of the board's violations of the Public Records Act to be placed on the agenda 7 times now, and it's still not on the agenda. Let's see if you can get it on there. I wish I could come here each time and congratulate you all on the positive things you're doing to make this board better at protecting consumers, but I fear that it just hasn't been possible. But I do thank those of you who contacted me privately after the last meeting and thanked me for what I'm doing and for the positive comments about our patient safety website. Let's start off by congratulating the recent board members whose sentences were extended on the board. It looks like we're in it together for a few more years. You all congratulate each other on all the good things, but never announce when any of you are in trouble. Why is that? Is that not information that the consumers should have? Since it's on the public record, I'd like to announce that Dev Gananadev, Howard Krause, and Kimberly Kirkmeyer are all being sued by a doctor that had his license revoked by this board over a conflict of interest by Howard's practice. This will prove interesting since we've been talking about Dev's conflict of interest in the Dr. Hari Reddy case, where he used his place on the board to help restore the license of a 4-time sex offender. Also being sued is Michelle Bolat, who's being charged with using her position at UCLA to racially discriminate against non-white physicians, causing a loss of work. It'll be interesting to watch these lawsuits as they progress. You all become accomplices when you sit back and allow the board to not do right by consumers and allow illegal activities to happen when it's brought to your attention. I'm addressing this to Kim even though I know she can't answer. Do you think you're better than me? Is that why you almost never respond to my emails? You're not better than me, Kim. You may make more money than me, but you're not more important than me. I am a citizen of this state and I deserve to have my emails answered when I ask you a direct question regarding the policy or a problem with this board. The more you ignore me, the harder I work to investigate the board and expose the problem. So any of you that don't like me coming here like this, look to people like Kim and Carrie who are exacerbating the problem. They seem to think that ignoring a consumer is the best way to handle situations when in actuality it makes them worse and is actually totally unprofessional. Likewise, if you get any calls from doctors complaining that we're exposing their disciplines on our website at forpatientsafety.org, they can thank the enforcement team and staff attorney Carrie Webb for all the misery they've caused for me and so many of the other victims who have lodged complaints with this board, only to have you shut them down, thereby not protecting the consumers of this state. It's because you didn't do your job when I filed the complaint in my death of my sister that I'm here every meeting now and watching your every move every single day of the year, exposing it when I see it. And that's not going to stop, I promise you. And there's more victims and advocates coming forward every day to hold you accountable. It's unconscionable that no one on this board is
Caller, you have reached 3 minutes. Please conclude.
I'll conclude in just a minute.
Please conclude.
Okay. Are there any additional comments on the phone?
I have no questions in queue at this time.
Thank you. Let's move to our next agenda item, approval of minutes from the April 19, 2018 board meeting.
I move to approve those minutes.
Second. All members? We need a roll call? Oh, public comment in the audience. Do you have a public comment on the, okay. Are there any comments on the phone?
Are there any comments on the phone?
I have no questions in queue at this time.
Okay. Ms. Cruz-Jones, please perform the roll call vote.
Dr. Bolat.
Aye.
Dr. Ganadev.
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins.
Yes.
Dr. Krause.
Yes.
Ms. Lawson.
Aye.
Dr. Lewis.
Aye.
Ms. Sutton Wills.
Yes.
Mr. Warmoth.
Aye.
Ms. Wright,
Abstain.
Dr. Yip,
Aye.
Ms. Pines.
Aye. The minutes are approved. I'm now moving to agenda item 5, the President's report. Dr. Gananadev and I had calls with executive staff to discuss the meeting agenda and other board projects. We have had frequent calls due to all the issues going on at this time of year. Additionally, I had a call with the Department of Consumer Affairs regarding executive officer salaries, the DCA regulatory review process, a legislative update, and discussion on DCA pro rata. DCA has hired a third-party agency to look into the salary disparities among the boards, and in 6 months, we hope to have appropriate action taken. Other than that, that call went very well, and I look forward to continuing to keep an open line of communication with DCA. In April, several board members were in Sacramento for the board's legislative day. The event was a major success. There were several tweets in order to update the public, and there was a significant amount of positive feedback and turnaround. In May, the board released the first podcast of many to come. The topic of this podcast was Medical Board Death Certificate Project. Staff are working on several podcasts, the change to the licensing process, the information regarding complaint, investigative, and discipline processes. This morning, this morning the board held a press conference and invited the media to preview the new iOS application that the board launched to help the board further its mission of consumer protection. Overall, the press conference was a major success, and the board will be continuing outreach on the app, and Ms. Kirchmeier will talk about it a little bit later. So as board president, I will have a consumers first approach. And where the board has control of impact, we'll strive to do our best. I look forward to continuing our efforts to improve consumer protection by working with the board members and staff to implement our strategic plan. We'll shift our Check Your Doctor's License campaign towards an initiative, making a stronger commitment with ongoing effort in all our public facings with legislators, licensees, and the public, with outreach to include a broader range of partners. As a team, we'll work with all stakeholders to reduce enforcement timelines and support board staff on technology enhancements from our web platforms to the License Alert app to continue outreach efforts that began with teleconferencing 5 years ago. During my tenure, I hope to see the patient notification bill pass and the progress towards approval of a physician's health program. Most importantly, 90% of our current board members will remain on the board for the next 2 years, so we have a very strong consumer protection team. Are there any questions from the members of the President's report? Are there any public comments from those in the audience? Ms. Ree?
Yes, I thank you again for listening to me. As I begin to understand how the board works, and for myself being a licensed physician and that sort of thing, I believe that our nonprofit organization, Global Health for Peace, can help to bring light to or have suggestions for bringing peace as far as consumer protection, maintaining licensed physicians, that sort of thing. And I would ask someone for an opportunity to maybe do a very small presentation on ideas. So, for example, one idea that we have and that we've observed is that it seems that maybe perhaps a suggestion to help bring peace amongst all of us here and calling in is that there may be a lack of measured endpoints that could show that, for example, in fact, the DCA, the medical board, are succeeding because here's the
Dr. Reed,
evidence.
this agenda item is on the president's report. So from this point on, you need to direct your comments to the matter that's the agenda item.
Yes, okay. Thank you for the correction. Thank you. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments from those on the phone?
No, thank you.
Okay. Moving to agenda item 6, board member communications and interested party. Do any members have anything to report? Dr. Ganavadev?
Yeah, just to confirm, Ms. Pines and I had multiple conversations with multiple people on remaining items on the sunset. And then I had conversations with the governor's office and the reappointments and some constituents. So that's nothing related to any new functions, but what was remaining on the board's sunset, which the remaining 2 items. That's all.
Okay. Any other members? Okay. Are there any public comments from those in the audience? Are there any comments from those? Oh, do you have a comment? Yes. Okay.
So thank you. On the sunset report, I'm wondering if perhaps it may be of benefit to have more confirmation of matched endpoints. So, for example, if there were some goals to which statistics can show that the goals were met by the medical board, that would be a great solution to perhaps kind of this non-solution that exists, I suppose, but seeing a measured endpoints at the sunset reports would be wonderful to see, and that can be easily done with statistics. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any comments on the phone?
No, thank you.
Okay. The next agenda item is 7, presentation on community paramedicine project from Dr. Backer. I would like to ask, he's there. Dr. Backer is the director of the California Emergency Medical Services Authority, where he leads the department in establishing and enforcing standards for EMC personnel, coordinating the local EMC systems, overseeing the development of statewide care systems, and preparing for and responding to disasters. Dr. Backer previously served for 10 years at the California Department of Public Health, was Associate Secretary for Emergency Preparedness at the California Health and Human Services Agency, and practiced emergency medicine full-time for 25 years in rural, urban, and suburban settings. Dr. Backer, thank you.
Thank you very much for some of your very valuable time. So I'm a physician boarded in emergency medicine, preventive medicine, public health, and now in EMS. And I wanted to address the board about a program we've been working on, which I think should be of very much of interest to physicians in general, and I know that I've had a lot of interest expressed to me by physicians from all different types of specialties and work environments. We are doing this, it's called the Community Paramedicine Pilot Project, and it's being run through the auspices of OSHPD, and it is a statutory program to explore new uses of our existing healthcare workforce, or expanded roles for our healthcare workforce. This uses paramedics, and some of the key functions of it. And let me just say, to begin, I will spend a short time leading you through a few slides to show you some of the results that have been generated by our independent evaluator at the University of California, San Francisco workforce department, and they receive the results directly from the pilot projects and create these reports. So I wanted to show you a few of the results, and then we have time for questions. The key parts of this are that these are community developed programs. They are not programs that the EMS system develops on their own. It requires partnerships from both the EMS agency, from the healthcare agency, and from not the healthcare agency, but a part of the healthcare system, and from the EMS providers. And they attempt to bridge emergency and primary care and fill some of the gaps in our healthcare system. And there's no question that there's a lot of gaps in the healthcare safety net. And I do want to say that EMS providers are a part of our healthcare safety net, very much like our emergency departments. They respond to everyone. They don't ask questions up front about reimbursement or about who the people are or where they are. And this really uses paramedics outside of their traditional roles. Why would we focus on paramedics? Because they have some unique characteristics. They're mobile, very mobile, and dispatched by radio. They are 24/7, 365, so they're always available. And they work under protocol and under medical control. And lastly, they're very trusted in the community, whereas some public safety people have to worry about, and healthcare personnel have to worry about going into certain neighborhoods and parts of our communities. EMS personnel seem to be accepted anywhere to help the public when they call 911. We tested several different pilot concepts rather than just one single program. And we didn't make these up. These have been tried and developed in many other parts of the country and are being utilized by other communities, both rural and urban. So we picked the ones that we thought would be of interest. We allowed the different communities to propose projects and then approve them. So you'll notice, well, let me go back. You'll notice that some of these are emergency-based. In other words, they are in response to a 911 call, and others are non-emergency, like the post-discharge follow-up. And some of them are what we call alternate destination. In other words, our current statute requires paramedics to take patients to the emergency department and to the emergency department only, even if that is not necessarily the best place for them to get their care. The results that I'm going to show you are comprise about 2.5 years worth of these pilots, and we looked at outcomes across 3 domains. Mainly patient safety was number 1, effectiveness, and then potential savings, although this was not primarily a cost efficacy study. So these are the numbers of patients that we have results on. It's over 3,000 now. More than half of these, or approximately half of them, are part of our post-discharge follow-up programs. And then these are the insurance status of the various programs. What you'll notice is most of them are Medicaid, or our Medi-Cal program, or uninsured. The post-discharge are predominantly Medicare because they tend to be elderly patients. And I think, interestingly enough, the one that has the most equal division among insured and uninsured and government insured is the frequent EMS users. Those are the people who frequently call 911 multiple or many times a year, and all EMS services have those. If we look at the post-discharge programs, most of the programs dealt with heart failure. Some of them took on other chronic conditions. You'll notice that almost all, with the exception of 2 programs, showed marked reduction in hospitalization with the 30-day rehospitalization rate based on baseline rate. Let me emphasize, because I know that the board had some concerns about a couple of things. One, that paramedics, not being adequately trained to address this kind of chronic illness. Secondly, patients should be seen by their physicians rather than a paramedic. I agree with the latter. They should be seen by their physicians, but they're not often seen within days of discharge. If that were the case, if a physician could see a patient within 48 to 72 hours of hospital discharge, I'm all for it. But they usually can't, and paramedics can. Paramedics can get out there within 24 hours, 48 hours, 72 hours, and all these programs did a visit within that time period. They are not taking over treatment of these illnesses. They are trained, and their usual job is to assess a patient and determine, how the patient is doing and what the patient needs and how urgently they need it and what kind of facility they need to go to. In this case, they are simply trying to determine if the patient is hooked up with the healthcare system, if they understood their discharge instructions, if they're taking their medications appropriately, and doing some medication reconciliation. In fact, one of the things that they found most often to be a problem is when they get all the patient's pills from the cabinet, from the hospital, from everywhere, out on the table, they have multiple pills of the same kind or contradictory that they're still taking because no one saw all their medications at once. In looking at trying to reduce the use of these frequent users, they've had a significant success, especially the San Diego program was getting 35% reduction in these, mainly by connecting them with social and other medical services. These are people who often live on the streets, but not necessarily. They're people who have homes, they're people who are even insured, but they're people who are not well integrated into the system. So they're not taking over care of these patients, they're kind of helping to do case management and integrate them into other services. There's one project where they're working with public health as outreach workers to give directly observed tuberculosis therapy. And this doesn't really prove anything that they can get someone to take a pill, but it proves that their mobility, their 24/7 status, allows them to reach the patients that the community health workers in clinic couldn't reach. They could go out after hours, they could go to any part of the county, and they would hunt down and find these patients and have them take their medication and monitor their side effects. They have one very interesting program where they're working with hospice patients. This is not taking over hospice care. They have to do it in collaboration with the hospice agencies. And what they're doing is when a hospice patient or family calls 911, if this patient's enrolled in the program or with a hospice agency that they're collaborating with, they'll go to the house and they'll send a specially trained paramedic to go to the house and assess the situation, communicate with the hospice nurse, and determine whether the situation can be handled at home or whether the patient needs to come to the emergency department. And I think you can see they've achieved a marked reduction in managing the patient at home, which is generally the wish of the hospice patient. If the patient wishes to go to the emergency department, or they think that it's a new problem that's not part of their hospice care and can't be managed at home, they'll take them in there. But this is always in consultation with the hospice nurse. Another program is looking at taking mental health patients directly to mental health facilities for evaluation rather than routinely to the emergency department, where they spend time in a very chaotic environment, often don't get the psychiatric evaluation they need for many hours, and in some cases a day or two. And so if you look at the dark part of that, about a quarter of the patients they've been able to take primarily to a mental health facility. And this has proven to be very safe. There's been a few patients that they had to take back to the emergency department, but those patients were all either discharged or sent back to the psych facility after clearance. The other patients either were not eligible because of their history of having ingested substances or history of violence, or as we all know, the mental health system did not have the capacity to see those patients, and so they couldn't take them there directly. But this has been very successful, and not only does the community like it, but law enforcement loves it, because otherwise they're spending resources monitoring these patients and taking them to the emergency department and keeping track of them in the emergency department. We also have programs where they're taking inebriated patients directly to a sobering center where they're monitored by nurses, and at the same time they get social service intervention to see if they're willing to go into a program to stop their drinking. This has also proven very safe. There were patients, as you can see on this slide, that went to the emergency department, but all of them were either treated or released or sent for psych evaluation. Of the 3,000 patients, there has been no bad outcomes related to our program. So those are the slides that I wanted to show you, the results. But I think what I want to emphasize here is that this is something that is, again, it is a collaborative project that really is initiated not by EMS agencies going out to rustle up business. It's initiated by parts of the health system that need this kind of outreach and bridge to their patients that are not getting the services they need, or they don't have the ability to do the outreach to them. Either they don't qualify for home health, or they want someone who can help better manage and reach these people. We feel that this is a part of our healthcare system. These are people who have training and they are able to and routinely assess people for their acuity. They are able to now, in their current scope of practice, they have a large formulary. They can give prescription medications from narcotics to other things. They can do invasive procedures. These are people who know how to follow a protocol to evaluate a patient and make a determination of what kind of care they need and where it is best provided. They routinely bypass one hospital to get to a specialty care center now, whether it's a trauma center, stroke, or STEMI. So I guess I would like I would ask the board to maybe rethink your opposition to the current legislation, but with the caveat that we are not fully satisfied with the legislation that's currently out there. We are, in fact, have an official position now of opposed unless amended. But I thought that the board's reasons for being in opposition may not have been, indicated that you may not have had the full picture of the program and how it's been working so far. I'll stop there and see if there's any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Backer. I have one question, actually. So it looks like a third of the people who were in the pilot had mental health problems. Am I interpreting that correctly?
No.
So it was 3,000.
Slide. I'd have to go back to
3,000 people and 1,000.
This one, about a third to a fourth of the people who were eligible to be enrolled in this project were actually enrolled and taken to the mental health center directly.
Okay, that was I was trying to understand that. That was my question. The second part of that question is, what happened to the people who actually didn't get admitted? Did you just take them back home?
They went to the emergency department.
They went to the emergency. Okay, thanks. That's it. Are there any other? Okay, so Dr.
Dr. Bakker, yeah. You can see where the board's concern was: consumer safety, public protection, expansion of scope of practice, So these were the issues, and some of the items you have are actually they're part of a team. It's not a problem if they're a part of a team under the control of the teams who usually run these things. That is the base stations and so on and so on. So paramedics, yes, they can bypass all those things, but they are quite often they're under truly a physician who really guides them as a base station. What concerned here was they are allowed to make decisions themselves, which could be, there is a potential for detrimental outcome. I understand what we're trying to do. I think sobering centers are wonderful. I sympathize with the San Francisco General Hospital and the entire city and county of San Francisco who are struggling with this problem. But these are the concerns we have. So we haven't seen how that ER doc, you're an ER doc, ER physicians control under base station, somehow or other these things are done. So that's where our concern is, that is, even in my hospital, which is one of the largest hospitals in the state of California, when the mental health issue comes in, often they have to be cleared first by non-mental health personnel, ER doc. It's a requirement because you don't want to put them in our own hospital psych place or behavioral health place, we call it, without a complete clearance, because many of them are medications, many of have reactions. So that's why these are the ones, as you go into details, it concerns you somewhere. I mean, is there enough knowledge base and all that to forgo some of the protections we have right now?
Well, let me address some of that in that these paramedics are still working under medical control. And in fact, they have even additional levels of oversight. Some of their control may be from their usual emergency doctors, but in some of these programs, it's the physicians and part of the medical system they're working for that provide some of the medical control. For example, if they're doing a heart failure post-hospital discharge, their medical control may come from the cardiology group or from the physician group that they're working with to manage, to help check on these patients. And it's only short-term follow-up. It's not long-term. Secondly, we have about 5 layers of oversight. The medical protocols that are developed have to be approved by a local steering committee, by the medical director of the local agency, by the state, and then we have 100% review of their patient interactions. So we do have a lot of quality assurance built into these programs, and these paramedics are not making independent decisions beyond what they would make in their normal, paramedic practice, where they make decisions, but it's all based on the protocol that they are given in terms of what they can do, what kind of evaluation they're doing, and when they need to contact either the treating physician or the base station, whatever it is. So I don't see them, I really see this as more of an expanded role and not an expanded scope of practice, because we're not giving them any extra procedures. For the most part, there's not even, although they were giving tuberculosis therapy, we're not really giving them new drugs. So I think that there were a lot of levels of control built in and would continue to be built in, and a high level of quality assurance for these programs.
Dr. Hawkins?
Thank you very much. And so I find this very, very interesting and potentially valuable. I was looking in particular at the 30-day readmission rate. Although not 100%, that readmission rates in some of these communities would really be quite significant improvement. I did have a question. I'm not sure how answerable it is. One is that with the various paramedic concepts, Did you determine if there are any adverse availability of EMS to respond to 911 calls? So that's one question. And the other was, I'd like to hear a little bit more about what sounds like a navigator concept. I think that in many systems, we know that if you have navigators, whatever it is, you get folks where they need to go, you can have some efficiencies. Elaborate on that a little bit.
Yes, I'm sorry, the first question is about the,
Whether when you, with the various pilots, did you find you're less able to
with
provide
EMS.
service, respond to 911 calls?
These are, depending on the project, would depend on who would respond. But no, these were, these paramedics, the ones doing, say, the post-discharge follow-up, they're not scheduled to do 911 calls. So they have additional training and an additional role. In the ones like the Sobering Center or mental health, they the 911 will respond because those were based on a 911 call. So those don't interfere either, but they'll call in a specially trained person, say for the mental health, who's specially trained to do the evaluation and do the medical screening in the field. So that one they'll call in, who may be a supervisor who is trained. They'll come and respond. For the Sobering Center, it's all the paramedics are trained to be able to, go through the protocol as to whether that person can go. So in short answer, no, it does not interfere with the other part of the 911 system. And then what was the second part that you wanted responses?
It sounds like there's an important navigator concept when you describe one of
Yes, thank you. Well, the navigator concept is, I think that the requirement to take all patients to an emergency department is very inflexible when paramedics routinely make decisions of what kind of specialty facility a patient needs. And to be able to expand that so that they can take them to, with an appropriate protocol and screening, take them to a place where they can get the service they need directly rather than clogging up emergency departments, spending hours in an emergency department before they're secondarily transferred, I think has definite advantages. When you look at programs like where they need to, there's a need to marshal other community resources like the frequent 911, when a lot of these people may be homeless. They're just acting as someone who knows where to find these patients and goes and picks up these patients all the time and trying to get them and trying to bring in other services and wrap other services around them to help them decrease their use. So I agree with you. They're one of many resources that can help navigate patients through our complex medical and social service systems.
And I guess in a given community, you're tabulating where the deficiencies are, where the services might need to go to provide what's needed for these frequent flyers or whatever entity you're trying to look at.
These are very independent community-based projects. They're designed at the community level, and they're designed around the community resources. And each of these pilots had some a general standardized training, but then they had to go and have project specific training, which included, say, working with the cardiology group if they were doing heart failure, or working and learning all of what their local resources were and reaching out and becoming familiar with those resources.
Dr. Kraus and then Dr. Yip.
Thank you, Dr. Backer. I was very impressed with the presentation we had from a sobering center here at our last meeting, and I believe that there are great opportunities to improve the care and health of Californians by such programs. But I think strict protocols and oversight are key. And I also worry about who employs the paramedic. When it's a municipal fire department or police department, I have a little bit more faith. but I can recall at a meeting I attended a few years ago regarding the Paramedicine project, coming across some flyers that had been distributed encouraging private ambulance companies to get on board because this promised a bright future for improved income for them. So I have visions of privately employed paramedics who may be serving protocols of employers rather than protocols governed and ruled by physicians. And I'm comforted to know that California still has a corporate bar on the practice of medicine, because I'd like to think that every physician thinks of his patient's best interest before his employer's best interest. But I do have concern to protect the public by assuring that their care isn't hijacked by a for-profit corporation with other interests.
I fully agree with you, and what I would point to is my department has in our statute currently, it is not the provider agency that makes the protocols. They are statutorily under the EMS medical director of the local EMS agency. And for these programs, then it's also a two-level authority. My department has oversight as well as the local EMS agency. And then we engineered in for the protocol responsibility of the health system they're working with. So I would just have to assure you that what you envision is not how these programs are designed, nor could they work that way because they have multiple layers of oversight. And I also assure you that maybe sometime in the future, this could be a profit center potentially, but right now there is zero reimbursement, and they're doing this on faith that this is the right thing to do to be better integrated into the healthcare system, and potentially in the future there will be some form of reimbursement. I think that's reasonable if these are successful.
Thank you.
Dr. Yip?
I think your model is very interesting. I think in my community, I already see it very valuable, particularly in lower socioeconomic area and area which covered by like actual Medi-Cal, because a lot of 911 call by patients who have no right, who just because they're scared and nobody to talk to. I think your model has been very helpful if you work in conjunction with like certain area dominated by Medi-Cal, managed care, IPAs, etc. I'm surprised to see a number that refer to urgent care is quite low, because as we know in ER, a number of those patients actually belong to urgent care rather than truly ER patient. I'm just interested in what happened to your statistic that was like so low and canceled.
Thank you for bringing that up. I didn't mention our alternate destination urgent care project because we actually canceled that project about a year ago, and because of the low enrollment. And we tried to understand why we had the low enrollment, because initially, before we started the projects, we anticipated that would be one of the highest enrolled projects, because all emergency docs know that there's a lot of potential urgent care patients that you see in the emergency department. What I think the reasons were a few. One is that these people who are not very sick, this was informed consent. So there was like a 3-page informed consent, to be enrolled and be taken to the alternate destination, and many people didn't sign it, didn't want to read it and sign it, and said, just take me to the emergency department. But the other thing, the main reason we did, I think we canceled the program, was because it turns out that urgent cares are not a regulated area in California. There's no standards for urgent care, for the urgent cares in terms of hours, capabilities, and medical and their medical diagnostics and treatment capabilities. So we found that either they weren't available at the hours that the patients were calling 911, or when they would call ahead or get there, they just either didn't have the capability or didn't want to they weren't used to having ambulances come. They just couldn't adapt to it, and they couldn't provide the services, even though a lot of it was simple orthopedic stuff or, needed simple laboratory. But so too many patients were getting shunted to the emergency department, but not because they were too sick for an urgent care. So we basically canceled those programs.
Dr. Bullock?
Thank you for this very informative presentation. And a couple of concerns I have is the protocols, and I heard the 5 layers, and the idea of standardization is extremely important. We all know that from basic quality initiatives, and it sounds like it could be that hospital X, Y, and Z in Los Angeles, sounds like the LA County, for example, EMS would have oversight, you'd have oversight over that, but the 3 hospitals may have different protocols, and that's what I heard, and I may be incorrect. The other point is who eventually is going to be billing and who will eventually be paying. And I bring that up because I think as a primary care physician that does have Medi-Cal managed care, the fragmentation is quite striking. And thirdly, I really worry about my physician colleagues where there's so much going on around us that we don't have the communication about what's happening to our patients that happen to be assigned under a primary care physician's name. So I like the idea of some of these, the hospice in particular, I think is very important, and that kind of resonates here for me. I was concerned about the sobering centers, probably less so than I was on the first go around. And then finally, just this whole idea of, again, now we have another program with models of extensivists doing post-discharge care when those are very sick patients. And many of our federally qualified health center physicians say, put them in a post-discharge clinic with extensivists who can spend 60 minutes with the patient because they're so complicated. And the discharge instructions sometimes are so lacking. And to your point of medication, reconciliation, and finding all of this, I see the value, but there's just still some concerns on my part. And so I think you've done a great job for helping me understand even further. So I think I made more comments than asking you questions. I apologize.
Thank you, but I will just comment that they always have an obligation to create a record and get it to the correct, either to the hospital or to the group that's managing the patient. They're not taking over anything. They're simply acting as a bridge until other services, whether it's through the physician or home health or other services, can take over. So these are not meant to be long-term management. That is not what paramedics do, and that's in fact, interestingly enough, the longest term projects were the frequent EMS users, because it would take many times to convince these people to accept social services and accept maybe being placed in an apartment, even if they're homeless, or to get regular medical care. So that was the one where they had the most follow-up. Other than that, it was really a couple of visits just to bridge the post-hospital transition.
Could you mention just what do you foresee as who's going to be billing and who's going to be paying?
Oh, yeah. In other states, because several other states have approved of Medicaid funding for either on a fee-for-service basis or some other basis, to the paramedics. Also, other models that have been used in other states are if the program can demonstrate savings, or either savings through reduced ED or reduced hospitalizations, then they kind of they share in the benefit. In other words, the health system may give them a percentage of demonstrated savings. We have hospice agencies that have approached EMS agencies, and they will pay them on a capitation basis. So all the same ways that other providers are reimbursed, these programs can and have been reimbursed in other states, not yet in California, but they have to demonstrate their value, which I think is a pretty high bar.
Thank you. Any additional questions from the board? Okay. Are there any comments from the public in the audience?
Yes, hello, Dr. Howard Backer. It's interesting being here with you in person. You're such a legend otherwise in the area. Yes, so it's, wow. So thank you for all your work. I mean, it's just incredible what you've done. So I guess my question would be, so it's the first time I've ever, learned of this topic. I'm wondering what percentage of your patients were non-white?
I'm sorry, Dr. Reed, you have 3 minutes for public comment.
Yes, thank you for refocusing me. So, so my comment would be that I believe it would be relevant, especially in this case for your study, to determine what percentage of the patients were low socioeconomic status or non-white, and whether in fact the percentage of patients who were served and benefited from this project were in fact non-white low-income patients. And by denying it, are we in fact implicitly biasing against low-income non-white patients?
I think we can safely say in this case that there was no bias there. Most of these patients were low income. I didn't show the data. The data is available as to racial breakdown, and you can go to the evaluation site and see that on a quarterly basis. It totally depended on the project because each project was focused on a different part of the system and a different group of patients. So, but that data is available, and I can assure you that it was a diverse population.
Thank you for your comment.
Yes, just to clarify my comment was that if in fact the board is not approving this by Dr. Backer, in fact, if you're not approving this, and in fact it was benefiting patients of low income and non-white patients, are we in fact accidentally not providing quality care? So that would be something that a certain patient population would benefit from and would like to hear about. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions in the audience? Are there any comments from the phone?
No, none on the phones.
Okay. Moving to the next item.
Thank you again. I'm aware that we went well over.
Yes. Thank you, Dr. Backer. It was important. Moving to the next item, which is item 8, update on the board iOS application. Ms. Kirchmeier.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I first would like to actually draw your attention to a flyer that's actually should be sitting in front of all the members. So this is our new flyer regarding our new application that just came out today, and there's also copies in the back. And then also at your place should be a little card like this. This is the other thing that is actually introducing the new app. So as Ms. Pines actually stated this morning, the board had a successful press release today to launch the new iOS app. We had several press members here and on the phone. I want to thank Sean Eichelkraut and Frank Aslami for the incredible work that they've done in developing this application. The board is the first in the country to have an app that directly notifies a patient when a change occurs to a physician's license. We will be doing outreach on the app now that it has launched and also receiving feedback as well. We did have some testers that tested it before we went live today. So thank you to the members that tested that and everyone else. And we thank them for assisting us there are definite advantages to the app, and we hope you all download it as soon as possible if you haven't already. And then also, we do have several of these cards if you would like to take them, actually. And for those of you that, really are in the community, if you want to take some of these cards and you could hand them out to individuals that you run into regarding this new app. So we do have some here, and if not, we can send them to individuals. So with that, concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kirschmeyer. And so I advise everyone that has an iPhone who's in the audience right now to please download our app. Go to the Apple Store and download the Medical Board of California app. Okay. Are there any questions from the members or comments about the app? So I have a question. So for those who do download the app and put their doctor's information in, how often should they expect an alert?
Well, that's actually the beauty of it. The whole app is, what's interesting is we hope actually that individuals get an alert once every 2 years. Because really it's only when the physician's profile is updated. So really the one app update that most individuals are going to get is when their physician actually renews their license. So you might sign on, you might download the app, and you will hear from us once every 2 years. However, for those, if there's an individual who actually has a complaint that goes through the disciplinary process, and you have that individual as your physician, or you just know about this individual and you download and follow that individual on your follow list, then you would get that potentially at the time of suspension. You could get it at the time the accusation's filed, and then when disciplinary action is taken against that doctor. But for the majority of individuals in California, they're probably only going to hear it when that individual probably renews their license, or if they move, or if they update their survey. So that's kind of the way the app works. It depends on the person you're following and what happens with that individual. So it might be that you don't get it for a while.
Okay, thank you.
For those
Ms.
of us
Wright?
who are not iPhone users, is there going to be
I'm with you on that.
Samsung?
There is. So this was our first round. Actually, the programming for the Apple was easier, and we also looked at the statistics. I said it wrong today, but we receive about 30% of the individuals that use and go to our website are iPhone type users. Out of those, 70% of them are Apple users. So that's why we went to Apple first, as well as the fact that it was a little bit easier programming. We want to work out all the bugs with the Apple, so we are asking for feedback on it as well. And you can do that either through our webmaster or in the actual app itself, give feedback there. Once we get that, hopefully, to the perfection, and we're hoping it is right now, but bugs always work out, and they're going to release a few more updates to it, then we'll move into developing for Android.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the audience or comments? Please come forward.
Thank you. Julie D'Angelo Felmuth from the Center for Public Interest Law. I just want to congratulate you and your staff on this app. It's wonderful. I was one of the testers. And it did take me a while. I'm kind of techno-challenged, so it took me a little while to figure it all out, figure out how to do it. But once I did, it was easy, and I got the notices. And in fact, it improves consumer protection because in the case of a disciplinary action, you get the notice on the date the decision is issued or the stipulation is approved, as opposed to waiting 30 days for the effective date. So it improves consumer protection, and I was told earlier today that you're the first board probably in the country to do this.
Yes.
So that's a real feat. Thank you.
Thank you, Julie. Are there any additional comments in the audience? Are there any comments on the phone?
Yes, I have two. Our first from Eric Andrus. Your line is open.
Hi, it's me. I rarely disagree with Julie, but I have to now. I have a lot of concerns and questions about this app. You're touting it as though it's going to be more effective than your website, but we all know your website is a huge failure for successfully being able to inform citizens about doctors. This app will only be as good as Breeze. Remember, this board only disciplines 4% of the 10,000 complaints that come in from consumers, so the bulk of complaints will never be seen on this app. Breeze is sorely lacking because you've admitted there are upwards of 15,000 public disciplinary documents missing. If a citizen looks up one of those doctors, they're not going to see those documents on this app. This past week, I've tweeted about a number of doctors with egregious harm and death that have clean records on Breeze. So how is it that you think Breeze is successful? Now, this app is simply not going to reflect what's on, or should I not say on Breeze. You should all pull out your phones right now and look up Dr. Michael Feiz, F-E-I-Z, a plastic surgeon in Beverly Hills. I guarantee you will not find him in this app. And there's a lot of doctors that you simply can't find in Breeze. Someone should address what kind of information this app collects from our iPhones. Does it have access to our phone books, emails, Facebook? Is it tracking the doctors we're following, and will you be giving that information to the doctors or others? How much did this app cost to be built, and what are the ongoing costs to run it and update it? If you can't even afford to hire investigators, you can't to investigate our complaints. How do you have enough money for this? It's really false advertising to tell consumers that they can get real-time and complete information with this app. We'll be watching very closely how you sell this.
Next person.
Carmen Belber, your line is open now.
Hi, this is Carmen Balder, Executive Director of Consumer Watchdog. I have to say that I will probably use this app, and I'm sure a number of journalists will use this app. And the few selected Californians who have a clue that the medical board's website is there and that they have the right to look up a doctor's disciplinary history might benefit from this app too. But I think the board is missing the point when it comes to public disclosure of physicians' disciplinary history, and that is the board's website is not the best place to obtain that information. Nothing can replace in-person disclosure at the point of a patient's appointment of a doctor's disciplinary history. So SB 1448 in the legislature would require disclosure of some of that probation. I appreciate that the board supports that, but you also only supported it once the author agreed to roll it back and only disclose certain types of probation. So I have to agree that although this app might be useful for a few people, this is not the solution to ending transparency about physician misconduct. We would urge the board to redirect your resources from the marketing strategy, because unless you have tens of millions of dollars to run television ads statewide, this information is really never going to reach the patient public. Redirect those resources into advocating greater transparency and improving the enforcement process. Thanks.
Thank you for your comment. Moving to the next item, which is item 9, discussion and possible action on amending Title 16 California Code of Regulations, Section 1355.4, Notice to Consumers. Ms. Webb.
Thank you. Members, if you can please turn to tab 9 in your materials. As part of the board's sunset bill last year, SB 798, the board asked that the B&P Code Section 2026 be changed to extend the required notification to patients and clients to all licensees and registrants of the board. So sometimes we call this our signage regs. It's the posting that you see in compliant doctor's offices, or they provide a written notice to patients. So we're looking to expand this to from just physicians and polysomnographic registrants to also licensed midwives and research psychoanalysts. Additionally, the board sought to make the required notification more robust to indicate that the provider is licensed or registered by the board, and that patients or clients can check up on the provider's profile and file a complaint by contacting the board. These proposed regulations will apply to all of the licensees and registrants of the board, and compliance can be achieved by posting a sign meeting the requirements of the regulations, by providing a notice in writing with a signed acknowledgement and receipt by the patient or the patient's representative, and that is maintained in the patient's file, or providing the notice on letterhead or in discharge instructions or in some other document that is given to the patient for them to take. And also, there's a copy that would be maintained in the physician's file or licensee's file. These three options exist under the current regulations, and the proposed language would apply these notice options to the board's other licensees and registrants. The requirement to provide the notice in the patient's or the patient's representative's primary language is new. This would require the provider to provide the notice in a written statement in the patient's primary language and kept in the patient's chart with a notice and acknowledgement of receipt, or provided to the patient or the patient's representative to take with them. So if the sign is in English, then the provider will have to do a separate written notice in the patient's primary language if it is not in English. I would need a motion to approve the proposed regulations to allow us to submit it to DCA and agency for review, and if it's approved, to submit it to the Office of Administrative Law for proper notice for a 45-day comment period and to set a hearing, and to allow staff to make any non-substantive changes necessary to this language to move it forward through the regulatory process.
So moved.
Are there any questions from the members, comments? Dr. Yip?
Just comment, when this is actually carried out, I think the board should have a service, a website that can actually print this instruction in many different language that we can download. Like now for Medicare Managed Care, you deny drug or service, they send you 7-page letter with different language. For physicians, it's very hard to do. You may see different language patient walk in, but I think you can go to the website and download the language for that particular patient to be very helpful. Thank you.
I think that's a great idea.
Are there any other comments from the members?
It's from DC.
Okay, I have a slip here from Megan Alred.
Good afternoon, members. Megan Allred, speaking on behalf of the California Medical Association. Just on the regs, CME is concerned about the proposed requirement under the reg to provide the notice in the patient or patient representative's primary language. While we recognize the importance of language access to pertinent consumer information, given California's diverse population, the requirement would be virtually impossible for physician offices to comply with. The current proposed language would require a physician to have on hand the consumer notice in any language that may be the patient's primary language, no matter how obscure. Further, there's no statutory authority for this requirement under the cited authority under BNP Code 2026 or 138. We request that the board remove this requirement or propose an alternative that would not add to the mounting administrative burdens on physician practices. And to that, we would strongly support Dr. Yip's recommendations on having something downloadable so that there is access to this and they would not have to come up with it at the time that they find out the patient's primary language at the visit, where they have to then provide them the notice. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any other comments from the audience? Are there any comments on the phone?
No, not on the phones.
Okay, great.
I have one question.
Sure. Mike?
Oh, sorry. To Dr. Yip's comment about downloadable information, do we have access to every language? I thought we only had access through DCA to a few of them, medically translated.
So a couple things. First of all, the sign itself is already downloadable on our website, but it is only in English right now, and the one that's out there as it's currently written. So that is something we already have. So we have Google Translate, where you can actually go onto our website, and if you click on the Google Translate down at the bottom, it actually changes the website into that. But to Dr. Yip's point, so you could do it that way, that's one way it could be done, but to Dr. Yip's point, we have the ability that we could get a lot of the translations and have them ready on our website. I think that is an excellent idea.
Yeah, Kim, actually, I support that too because it's small private offices. There is no way they can have Yiddish. There's so many languages in Southern California, so that's why it's important for us to, when we require something, we should be able to help.
Dr. Warmoth? Oh, Mr. Warmoth.
Yeah, I also support Dr. Yip's comments. My question, though, is that an amendment to this? That are we considering that as part of the recommendations?
No, it's a service that the board can provide. I do want to point out, as far as authority, that the code section says that providers are to provide notice to their patients or clients, and so to effectively do that, it needs to be in a language that their patients and clients can understand. And if the provider is getting federal funding, they already have to provide translation services. And so this is, I think, doable, and it is within the board's authority to require this. And I think the board can assist in getting the notice out there to make it easier for physicians to, and our other licensees and registrants to comply with.
Okay, great. Any other questions, any comments? Okay. Ms. Cruz-Jones, please do the roll call.
Dr. Bolot? Aye. Dr. Gonadev?
Aye.
Dr. Hawkins?
Yes.
Dr. Kraus?
Yes.
Ms. Lawson? Aye. Dr. Lewis?
Aye.
Ms. Sutton-Wills?
Yes.
Mr. Warmoth?
Aye.
Ms. Wright?
Yes.
Dr. Yip?
Yes.
Ms. Pines?
Yes. Okay, motion moves forward. Moving on to agenda item 10, Executive Management Report, Ms. Kirschmeyer.
So please find the executive management reports under agenda item 10, but there are a few items I would actually like to bring to the board's attention. As stated at the last board meeting, the board is still unable to obtain any budget detail due to the Department of Consumer Affairs switching over to a new accounting database. We are uncertain as to when those reports will be received, and until those reports are received, we are unable to provide any information on the board's expenditure for the close of fiscal year 17-18. However, we have been told that the board's spending was up this year, and the board is projected to spend its entire budget. In your packet is the most up-to-date fund condition, which indicates the board will be at 5.4 months reserve at the end of this fiscal year. However, the board, even with the general fund loan being repaid this year, is projected to be at 1.7 months at the end of fiscal year 19-20. We have not received confirmation, however, but it has been stated that the remainder of our outstanding loan will be repaid very soon. I would like to provide an update on the board's restoration of the disciplinary documents that were required to be removed from the website between the years 2013 to 2015. In a previous report, it was stated that approximately 15,000 documents needed to be added to the website. I am pleased to report that to the best of our knowledge, all of the documents that were removed from the website to comply with the previous law, which required reposting under the new law, have been reposted. It is important to note that some of the documents no longer meet the law to be reported and therefore have not been re-added, such as malpractice settlements and citations and fines. It is also important to note that pursuant to the law, public reprimands or public letters of reprimand only remain on a physician's record for 10 years. A citation that has been resolved is only on the board's website for 3 years, and malpractice settlements are only on a physician's profile if there are 3 or more settlements in a low-risk category within a 5-year period or 4 or more settlements in a high-risk category within a 5-year period. In addition, an accusation that has been dismissed or withdrawn cannot be on a physician's profile on the website. The board has a document on its website that explains the laws regarding the posting of information on a physician's record, and the board recommends that individuals use that document to identify what documents can and cannot be on a physician's record. I would like to draw the board's attention to pages BRD D-1 to 2. This is the board's flyer regarding the mandatory use of cures. This flyer has been distributed to numerous organizations and to all licensees. The board has been receiving a lot of questions regarding the mandatory use of cures, and those questions have been answered in the executive office. We are compiling all of the questions into an FAQ document that should be released in August. I will also be assisting in a webinar about the requirements in August as well. The board also put together a CARES webpage and has a significant amount of information regarding CARES on it. In my administrative report are statistics regarding the number of physicians registered in CARES and also the number of patient activity reports that were requested from physicians. In addition, I have asked the Department of Justice to provide information on CARES, out of CARES, on prescribing. Those are some of the reports that have been requested from some of the board members, and so we're working on those reports, and I hope to provide those to you actually at the next board meeting. If not, I'll email them ahead to you, but also report them at the board meeting. I wanted to report that the board finalized its annual reconciliation of hospital and peer-reviewed data that is reported to the National Practitioners Data Bank versus information that's received by the board. During the reconciliation, 3 reports appeared to have been received by the data bank that were not received by the board. The board has opened cases regarding those 3 reports and will take the necessary action if it is determined that the matter should have been reported to the board and it was not. I also wanted to let members know that I have attended 2 meetings of the Substance Abuse Coordination Committee at the Department of Consumer Affairs. This committee is made up of executive officers of every Healing Arts Board, a designee from the Department of Healthcare Services, and the director of the department. The committee is looking at edits to Uniform Standard 4 regarding biological fluid testing. Although a minor edit was made to allow boards to authorize travel for licensees who may need to travel out of country, no other edits have been made to date. However, another meeting will be scheduled where more information regarding tested will be provided to the committee members so we can determine if any other changes need to be made. We've also been meeting with the Governor's Office and the Attorney General's Office on changes to the vertical enforcement model and potential legislation. If there is legislation that actually is introduced anytime after this board meeting, it may necessitate the need for an interim board meeting or an executive committee meeting. And so I'll be meeting and working with Ms. Pines on that. And the 2 individuals who have been working with us on the VE has been Ms. Pines and Dr. Ganadev, and so we'd like to keep that going through the time that we get this legislation through as well, if any legislation is introduced. And then lastly, I want to draw your attention to pages BRD 10E 1 to 54. These pages contain 3 policy reports that were approved by the House of Delegates at the Federation of State Medical Boards meeting. The 3 reports are regarding regenerative and stem cell therapy practices, prescription drug monitoring programs, and physician wellness and burnout. As stated in my administrative summary, the board may want to review these policies and determine if the board wants to change any of its processes based upon these reports. For example, the board may want to establish a subcommittee to review the stem cell policy and its recommendations to determine if the board needs to change the way it conducts investigations or possibly sponsor legislation on this issue based upon the recommendations. Board staff is already reviewing the report on physician wellness and burnout to determine if, based upon the report, any changes need to be made to our licensing application. And actually working with Ms. Alameda and Ms. Webb, we do believe that we need to make 2 changes to the application that will be coming in the new app that's released with the 2020 changes. On the drug monitoring policy, it appears that most of the recommendations our state has actually already implemented, and so it's nice to know that we're ahead of the game on that one. Finally, regarding FSMB, the board has been notified that it will be attending the FSMB and members, our representative, will be attending our meeting next year in August and will be providing an update on the FSMB and the projects and topics they are looking into as an organization. And if any member has any specific topic they would like the FSMB to discuss next year, please let me know so I can pass that on to those individuals as they prepare for coming to the board meeting. And that concludes my report. Does anyone have any questions?
Dr. Kraus.
Thank you, Kim. I think the FSMB is an extremely valuable organization. Having worked on the stem cell and regenerative therapy work group for the FSMB, I'm actually in support of all of the recommendations, and I do think it would be of value for us to have a subcommittee to consider those recommendations, to act upon as a state board and consider where we may need legislative assistance. As I look at the recommendations, some of them are general, and in numbers 2 and 5, if we're not acting on those already, we should be. And basically 2 is to raise awareness on the part of the public as well as physicians in terms of current law regarding stem cell and regenerative therapies. And number 5, I don't know if we do this, but there is data available on the FDA website regarding warnings that are issued by the FDA, and I would hope that we do monitor those and launch investigations as they may be indicated. And the last item regarding the FSMB is, will the governor allow us to go to Texas next year?
So Texas is on the banned list. We can put in a request to go there and see if it gets approved. There is an exemption process that we can apply for.
I recommend we do that. Thank you.
We can.
Are there any additional comments from members?
Kim, just for public information, what does the state still owe us on the loan?
So currently, we still have $9 million outstanding. However, we've been told that should be coming, I believe, I'm going to look at Ms. Molly, I think we've said within the next month. They're just waiting for the final documents to show that was deposited.
Okay, the last question is on physician wellness and burnout. FSMB, there is a lot of discussion going on what we can ask on the application. So do you know where we are on that one?
Yeah, so that's the one with talking with Ms. Alameda and Ms. Webb, that we actually have looked at our application and we believe that there's 2 questions. I think it's 2 questions that we're going to be removing based on the input from the Federation and some questions that we've had. So 2, yeah. So we will be removing those from our application.
Do you need a motion to establish a subcommittee, or can the president do that?
The president can do that, and if there's members that are interested, that's what we would need to know, because we can appoint individuals. Ms. Pines can appoint individuals, but if you have a special interest in that, we would like to know that.
I still have an interest.
Okay. Do we need to make that an action item at the end? Okay.
We'll table the committee.
Mike.
Table the committee's selection till another time?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, Ms. Kirschmeyer. Are there any questions, any additional questions from members? Any questions from the audience? Any questions on the phone?
Yes, one. Eric Andrus, your line is open now.
So the 15,000 documents have been put back to the best of your knowledge. Kim, I'm finding it very hard to believe that you put all these documents back, as I'm still finding a lot of documents missing from Breeze, documents that should be there. You know I'm sending in public record requests for these and getting most of them, and then they're being added back to the doctor's profiles as I find them missing. So how are you discerning that the 15,000 documents have all been added back that you don't know for sure? Do you really not have a way to check and validate this with certainty? This was a law passed by legislator Susan Eggman. It's a law that you have to put them back. You can't be wishy-washy about it. I think you're just saying this so that we stop letting the public know that so many disciplinary documents are missing from your website. I will continue to point out all the documents I find missing on social media, and I will play the video clip of you stating that they've all been put back. How's that?
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments on the phone?
Yes, one more. Marian Hollingsworth, your line is open, ma'am.
Hello, thank you. This is Marian Hollingsworth. I'd like to thank you for the update on the missing documents, and I had expected it to take longer. If we do find missing documents, whom should we send this information to? Also, I missed asking a question earlier about the phone app, and that is, will doctors know who signs up to see their information? And the reason I ask is that some people do have gag orders on their settlements, and that could, there's a concern that that could jeopardize that gag order and put the patients in jeopardy. So if you could answer those two questions, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments on the phone?
No, none. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to agenda item 11, Vertical Enforcement Program Update from Health Quality Enforcement Section. I'd like to ask Ms. Guerrero and Mr. Gonzalez to come forward. Ms. Guerrero is currently the supervising investigator in the Valencia District Office, and Mr. Gonzalez is a retired annuitant working out of that office. Both have extensive experience investigating medical board cases and we're very happy to hear from them today. Thank you.
Thank you. My name is Julie Garino, and I'm a supervising investigator with the HQIU Valencia Field Office. I'm here today with Mark Gonzalez, who is an investigator with the Valencia HQIU Field Office. I want to thank you and the board for allowing us to take the time today to speak to you about our personal perspectives about what it's like to be an investigator with the field office in Valencia for the Division Investigation. Mark will be initially discussing the investigative process from an investigator's perspective. Mark?
Thank you, Julie. Thank you for having me talk to you today. I really appreciate it. I want to talk a little bit about my background and where I came from and where I'm coming back. First of all, I'm not a retired lieutenant. I'm actually a full sworn peace officer. And I actually worked for the state of California in the late 80s to 2003. I left in 2003 after 9/11, mainly to train military and in bioterrorism, warfare agents, signs, symptoms, antidotes. I was with DOD since 80, and I still am a consultant. I've done a number of different things. I actually got my Doctor of Pharmacy degree also many, many years ago from the University of Southern California. I actually taught at USC. I was on faculty there. At the medical school, I had interns, residents coming through my rotations in burn intensive care, acute care medicine, emergency medicine. I also taught the military tactical combat casualty care. Coming back was my dream, to come back, because I love these investigations. Every one of them is unique, and I think we're protecting the public dramatically in what we do. And I want to say that the main thing is that we're not just law enforcement officers. We are hiring people that have diverse backgrounds, and I'm not unique to the investigator class. We have people with advanced degrees that are doing things every day that are all part of the mix and this village that we've created that are doing these investigations that really care. And just to humanize these things, we're the people that go out and talk to family members of victims, even in overdose cases. I do overdose investigations for the Department of Defense, and going out and seeing the parents' faces of, say, a child that just came home, and they were perfectly fine, but they had pills in their stomach, obviously going through metabolism still. And they went to bed, everybody went to bed, and the one thing that they all noticed was that there was this loud snoring coming from their room. And the snoring became gradually longer in duration. In other words, they would only hear that snoring maybe once or twice a minute. And I think a lot of the physicians here know that those were respirations going down to 1 to 2 a minute. Next morning, they found their loved one dead. So many times we're writing those reports and reporting what we see. However, that's the other side that we see. And we have to live with that, and we have to actually interact with those people. And it's tremendous work. And that's the humanization of this job. And the other thing is the complexity. I noticed we had very, very egregious cases back in the 90s also, but the complexity of the cases have gone astronomical in comparison to the world. The world has changed completely, and we see things that are just, it's not just shocking the conscious, it's shocking the spirit, and you're just blown away by what comes of some investigations. You start to work on these investigations, and all of a sudden it mushrooms into different facets, and you're following this, and the prosecutors that I deal with in the district attorney's office or the U.S. attorney's office or even the civil section of the U.S. attorney's office, the burden has just become so great to move forward with meaningful prosecutions. And I love working with the Attorney General's office, old friends that I've seen. It was great to reunite almost, and we've had a real good time in working together. But you know, these cases come in and they just are tremendous, and it's really just to give you that perspective of, you know, what the investigators are doing and the caring of the investigators. Every single investigator that I know, they get a case and they get into that case and they put their heart and soul into it. And believe me, it takes a toll on them. But wouldn't be doing anything else. Believe me, it's the most gratifying thing to get information and to work forward in these investigations. And, you know, I'm just lucky enough to be back and be doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I wanted to talk to you about was just a couple of case examples of what Mark is kind of explaining to you. I've been here 10 years. I started as an investigator. I was brand new. I was an investigator, non-sworn at another agency. And when I came to the medical board, 2 reasons. I wanted to get sworn. That was probably my primary, if truth be told. And the second reason was I believed in the mission. I believed in the mission that the medical board had. And just from a personal perspective, I not only believed in its mission, but the protection of the patients of the state of California was important to me, and I really didn't want to be bored. And this agency has met my expectations and some. I've never been bored. I've moved on from being an investigator. Now I supervise the field office in the Valencia, Southern California area. And as Mark said briefly, the canvas has changed from what I saw when I was an investigator first starting here. I would estimate I had about 15 cases at that time, and many of them were quality of care, and not to minimize what a quality of care case is, but the steps it took to investigate a quality of care case was much more finite than what we're seeing now. We're seeing a lot more of the opioid addiction crisis, as you all know, and the death cases in our geographical field office area really came to a head in 2010. A task force was initiated by the Ventura County law enforcement area, which we partner with, and it exponentially increased our caseload numbers in very complex death cases associated with the opioid addiction problem. And then as time has moved on, we've then got the CDPH cases, adding more work, more complex cases. And like Mark said, I'm very proud to work with the investigators in this agency. They are a group of fine individuals who are working very hard to protect the patients, and they're very resilient and with very difficult times. But one of the things I just wanted to say was one of my case examples, and this is just one of mine and one of many, many that I could sit here all day, which unfortunately they haven't given me all day to talk. So one of the case examples I got, because I think it was a good example of how a case can come into our office and look one way and then may turn into a completely different case. This case came in as what I guess I would term a behavioral issue with a doctor who was a medical director for a facility. And the behavior was kind of a stalking behavior of a peer subordinate medical licensee. And it had gotten to such a point that they had to actually file some criminal documents to get him to kind of back off. And although they didn't file an 805 complaint, it came in as basically an 805 complaint, which is they were looking at having to do something to him and they wanted to notify the medical board. So it started out as that. What's going on with this individual and why he's doing something like that as a medical professional. And as the case moved on, this is one of those moments where folks don't understand why a case can take that long to investigate. But as the case moved forward and interviewing witnesses and getting court documents and interviewing more witnesses and finding the ex-wife and ex-spouses are often very good information sources sometimes, it started looking like there might be a reason for the behavioral issues, which was some type of substance issue. Cures was identified, more interviews, more scripts were collected, time is moving on, but we're compiling and compiling and compiling this case. This individual was interviewed several times. By the time I had done the analysis of the cures report, it looked like at least one patient was getting approximately 21 high-end, high-milligram Percocets per month at 88 years old or high 80s. More interviews with the subject, licensee, and finally, after a great deal of investigation, we knew there was some type of substance abuse. He ultimately did admit to it. A disciplinary action was taken, and he is on probation now for a substantial amount of time. This is just one example of one of our cases, one of my cases. It is not unique, and to do it right, to do it well, takes time, and I believe in what we do. I love my job. I've said to people when I was a little kid, my mom used to say, "You were a nosy little girl." And I am, and now I get to be a nosy investigator, and I get paid for it. It doesn't get better than that. But what I'm here today to just tell everybody is these investigators, they're so talented. I am not unique in the investigative roster. We have got great people, and we enjoy our work. It's gotten tougher. Our caseload used to be 15. Now, many of the investigators have 35 and up. Supervisors back in the day never had cases or had one to keep them fresh. Now we have more than one. It's a challenge, but it's, I think, a very global challenge. As I use it all the time, we're a village, and we need to do this together. We need to support each other. We need to listen to the investigators as to what they need and help us meet the mission of the agency, which is to protect these folks. These files that I have on my desk, never ever do I look at that folder like it's a piece of paper, like it's a piece of cardboard that's got a label name. It is a person. Every single case I have is a person. That could be my mom, my sister, my brother, your mom, your significant other. And every one of them is important. And I think sometimes we lose sight of that in the bureaucracy of life. Mm-hmm. We get that. But I just wanted to take this moment, and I really appreciate you allowing us that, to really humanize the folks that are working in these field offices and how hard they work to meet the great demands of our community and the agency and the board. So I thank you.
Thank you both. I really appreciate it for you guys putting a face to who the investigators are. I've been on the board for 5 years, and I think this is the first time that we've had investigators speak to us in this way, in this manner, and to see your compassion and your emotion, that this is, you really do take this job to heart, and we appreciate your work. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Thank you for all your hard work in coming here and presenting. When I first joined the board, there were some groups that had some expressions of particular concerns about the investigative unit, particularly when it comes to people of color or doctors of color, and they felt that sometimes the investigative unit had some bias. So my question to you is, has that concern been presented to you? And if it has, what have you done to sort of mitigate some of that bias? Do you conduct roundtables? What do you do to sort of eliminate some of that? Because obviously it pops up in all aspects of everything that we do. So I just want to hear a little bit about how you vet your claims and how you deal with the sort of implicit bias that may or may not be present.
Thank you. That's a good question and a very relevant question. The first thing I just want to make sure, I'm sure you all know, any complaint that comes in is vetted out in the central complaint unit at the medical board. That was done way before I started with the board, with the agency, and they vet those complaints up there. They do collection of documents, they make a neat initial reach out to the subject physician, and then it is typically reviewed by a medical consultant up at the CCU unit, unless it's a prescribing type case that needs to go to the field immediately. Now, to answer your question, once it comes to the field, the issue of bias is very relevant and it's always on our minds. First of all, the agency actually sent everyone to implicit bias training, and that was a good training because it brings to the forefront to not forget every day that we need to be neutral. And that's something as a supervisor that we talk about a lot at staff meetings when we're staffing cases together, that to be neutral in every way, shape, or form. And my background, not to belabor that, but I was an EEO bureau chief in my prior life at a different agency, and it's very important to me to treat everybody the same and fairly, and to treat each case based on its facts. And we talk about this a lot because I think the more we have an open communication about that, the less chance there is to let any of that seep in without even recognizing it. And then everything we do is obviously overseen. When we have a report is done, I look it over, it goes up chain of command, ultimately it goes up to the head of the chain of command, and so there's a lot of oversight. So I'm hoping we're doing a good job at making sure that doesn't happen.
One quick follow-up question. Mm-hmm. If you do get complaints about a particular investigator and maybe they're targeting certain groups or there is some bias, for the sake of the public that sometimes gives us these complaints, can you sort of affirmatively state that you take a step to either discipline that person, there's some kind of administrative action, something happens, as opposed to just being ignored and sort of swept under the rug?
Anything like that would be absolutely dealt with. And that falls kind of under this category of progressive discipline that the state follows. And just like any kind of sexual harassment or any kind of bias or racial prejudice or any kind of prejudice for that matter, is absolutely a policy of our agency. And it would not be tolerated. Thank you. Dr. Ganavade?
Thank you. Thanks for coming. We know that even though they moved you to a different place, we still look at you as part of us. So. And we fought for it. Sometimes you don't win all. And now I also see that your staffing is improving. So what we're hoping, I know you work very hard, we're hoping to cut down this timeline. That's what everybody is asking, so I'll do the same thing with our AG's office. So we need to do whatever it takes to cut our timeline down. And as I don't have to repeat it, we have a tremendous respect for you, what you do.
Thank you. Dr. Kipp?
I was going to echo the same thing, but this is rare that we have you here and you can meet us all. So I'm going to catch the opportunity that from your perspective, you means the whole crew, what you think we, our staff, the DAG can do, to make the whole process smoother, more accountable, to make the complaint close early and prompt. From your field experience, what can be done? One or two that we want to hear.
Oh gosh, I need a lot of time here. It's getting close to dinner time. I think first of all, it's doing what we're doing here, which is meeting each other and educating and understanding everybody's role in what we do, because we all have a role. And as far as reducing the timeline, one of the things is somehow reducing the caseload number. I know, speaking for myself and Mark, we like to work hard and we can multitask fairly well in our own minds, at least. But working 35 or 40 cases of this complexity, the steps that we have to do this right, and to do the steps that we will need in order to refer this and have this accepted, say, by a DA or a federal agency for criminal filing, or even the administrative law judges, the bar is high. And we have to do this well. And we have to do it right, not only for the patients, but for the doctors. We have an obligation for that. And to do it right, it's very hard to do it when we have 35 or 40 cases and a supervisor carrying cases. That's the reality. Now, how do we get there? I'm going to leave that to a lot smarter and other people in this, in this mix. But that's something we have to work on. We have to look at the delays starting at the top all the way down and sideways. We've got a lot of people involved in a case investigation. We have to work with the Attorney General's office. That adds a component. If I have to work with the DA, adds a component. Everything adds to this. And I know, speaking for the field investigators in Valencia, we like being in the field. We like collecting the information to put this case together. And it's all these other pieces that add to the time frame. So I don't know, but I'm in the game with you to try to figure that out, because like I said, I love this. And what I love is to coming up with the end game of these case investigations. And it is frustrating all the way around when it takes too long. And I've seen that creep up exponentially as the years have passed. And I think a lot of it is the canvas of our community is changing. We've got a lot of people wanting us to get this, the opioid thing under, do something. A lot of it too is we're trying to get out there. When we're out there now, I think we've always done it actually, but educate. I don't go into any pharmacy without talking to the pharmacist about what we do, who we are. Every training I go to, I bring my cards. This is what we do. We are now partnering with our locals much more than we did 8 years ago. When I go down, and I went to, thank you for sending me to the Sherman Block training, I met 23 other sergeants there. When I came and introduced myself, they didn't know what we did. They don't know who we are. Now they do, and now they call us. So part of that is we're partnering to help the patients. We're trying to get on top of this. But the downside is we're making more work for ourselves. The more I go around and tell my vet, do you give out controlled? Well, I do. Do you have cure? Do you use cures? No, I don't. Well, this is how you do it. And then next thing I know, I get a call. I've got somebody that's abusing and stealing my meds. So luckily that wasn't on my client roster to do investigations, but it opens up more work. So it's a double-edged sword.
Dr. Kip, you have an...
Just one more.
Okay.
Do you have medical consultant on site to help you? Do you feel you have enough number, diversity, like specialties and knowledge of medical consultant to help you navigate all these cases, prioritize them, etc.?
That's a good question. My office has 2. We have 2. And Is that as many as I need? Probably not, if truth be told. We have a lot of cases, and they give me the clinical information I need in order to properly interview a licensee. Now, with that said, in my particular office, I have a specialist in anesthesiology and a specialist in internal medicine. A nice combination, because a lot of the cases, there's very few that they cannot adequately and appropriately get the investigators up to speed on how to question a licensee about the clinical care and treatment of a patient. They don't make the ultimate decision, though. They just help us ask the right questions. And like Mark was explaining, is we've got investigators that are very trained. We have investigators that are trained in all sorts of different specialties. We're not just law enforcement officers. So collectively, we're strong. Do we need more? Do we need more hours for them? Probably. But ultimately, it's an expert in the specialty of the care provider that is going to make a decision and opine on whether there's a departure from standard of care.
Dr. Krause, and then Ms. Sutton-Wills. Oh, and then Dr. Lewis.
You have our heartfelt thanks for your passion and your compassion, and I hope all of the investigators are just like you.
Thank you.
Because I think it's your passion for this that keeps you doing it. Because I've been told that you're not paid well. And this is a problem that we've been facing for years. We're told we have trouble filling out our staffing and maintaining our investigators because there are so many other opportunities to increase pay. So if you find that there are things that we could do to help you, to lobby for you, please let us know. Insofar as your caseload being overwhelming, there are two possible reasons for that. Either you're being referred cases that really are pointless and you shouldn't be working on, or we simply don't have an adequate cadre of investigators. So if there is anything that you think that we may be able to do to help you expand your investigative unit and to improve your pay, please let us know, because it all depends on you.
Thank you.
Ms. Sutton-Wills?
Thank you. Thanks for your presentation. We really appreciate your being here. Just on the issue of workload and going back to 10B, the line, that's not line item, but agenda item 10B, it looks like you've had more volume, intake volume, than you've had in the past, and that your processing time has actually gone down since 2013 in many areas. So in some areas it's gone up. And so I'm just wondering if there's a certain type of case that's viable, that's taking more time, that you could use more resources on. You know, can you just give us more information about those data points if that's something that's available to you right now?
To be honest, I don't really get involved in the data, thankfully. From my perspective, my personal perspective, the cases are simply getting more complex. For example, these death case reportings that were made to the agency, we get these reports, and we also have to deal with the statutes. And so there's a sense of urgency to get these done, and then it rolls up over something that we've already been working on. And the issue of the medical consultants, I rely on a lot on the medical consultants to assist me in understanding the ratio of the drugs and the combinations and the refills and the reportings on that. And I think a lot of it has to do with just volume of cases coming in. And it used to ebb and flow, and now it's just flowing. And we do have a certain amount of hours that can be used for medical consultant reviews. And so things there's certain places where a supervisor will note that things will not move as fast as maybe the investigator's even moving. And I think just collectively, that's something to really, and I'm sure you all are doing this is way beyond my scope, but looking at the totality of all of those pieces and what we can do to obviate some of that delay. And like I said, every person that we have to go through and staff a case with, whether that be an AG or a DA, there is delays.
I just ask a follow-up to that.
Sure.
When you talk about the medical consultant who's reviewing and your limit of hours, is that because you have X number of hours that you can use and you're tapped out? Or the workload of numbers of cases that go to those particular people? Can you explain that barrier to us a little bit more?
My understanding is their classification is limited to so many hours per year. And Kim might be able to elaborate on that a bit more. And then the field office numbers, in theory, are limited. Now, I know there's kind of moving around, but can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yeah, I think it's twofold. First of all, they are permanent intermittent employees, so they can only practice up to so many, or only work up to so many hours. I think right now what's happening, though, is with the budget for the Health Quality Investigation Unit, and maybe I'll ask Ms. Nichols to speak to this too, and Mr. Loomis when they come forward to speak next. But what's happening is because of the budget limitations of Health Quality Investigation Unit, because now they're getting to the point where all of their positions are filled, which is going to be great news. I think I'm speaking for you guys, sorry. When their positions are filled, then that takes away some of that salary savings that they've been able to use. And so their medical consultants, that line item gets tapped out. And so then you have to cut back on the hours that those individuals are working. So that's kind of, I think it's twofold. I think it's, you have permanent intermittent employees that may only be able to work so long, but then the real issue, I think, is the budget of what they have. And so that's kind of the issue where they're looking at right now.
Okay.
Dr. Lewis?
My first question is the quality of the medical consultant. I think the medical consultant is 1 or 2 or whatever their classification is, right? One of those. Do you feel, and this is a pretty blunt question, and you can just say what you feel, the quality of the medical consultants with either you or some of the other groups, do you feel it's adequate? They're qualified because you have certain physicians that gravitate to these jobs. They've retired from other jobs, and so I just want your feeling. That's the first part of the question. So if you want to answer that, and then I have a follow-up question.
The answer to that is yes.
They are
unquestionably.
Good.
I've had the same medical consultant in the Valencia field office longer than I have. Very solid, very experienced. And I have to tell you, she is not there for the money.
Good.
She is there because she believes in what we do. She can make a lot more money doing something else. And I cannot speak highly now. I can't speak for all of them, but I don't think this is an issue of whether or not there's quality. It's quantity.
Good. Well, I just have to ask because sometimes, you don't know. Now, the second part, your medical consultants are union. They're part of the union?
Yes.
Yeah. They're two. So I'm probably one of the few people that's been a state union doc. And I know, and I've been involved in collective bargaining, which went on for 7-8 months. So we can ask you, do you need more resources? Do you need more resources? It's limited by the contract and the bargaining team. And he's shaking his head too. So unless the bargaining team recognizes that the salary that they're bargaining for is not adequate, you're kind of stuck with it for a 2 or 3 year contract. And the only way we can get money is out of the governor's budget, and he's not, budging. So it's a great concept, but if you've never been in a union, you don't understand, you're locked in, right? So I don't see any other way, so you have to wait and get better people on your bargaining team.
Well, the way I feel is that as an investigator and as a supervisor of investigators, I'm always looking at a different way to build that mousetrap, We need to protect the patients of the state of California. We have a job to do. And collectively, I'm hoping that we can put all these great minds together and figure out the best way to make that work.
Right, exactly. So, that's it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments from members? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez, and thank you for clarifying your working role, that you are still active with us. We are happy about that. Thank you, Ms. Carino.
Thank
We
you.
appreciate you coming today.
Thank you very much.
Are there any questions from the public? Ms. Ree?
So, I apologize. Is it time for questions or statements, or am I?
Comments?
Oh, comments? Okay, can I ask them questions, or?
Just provide, you have 3 minutes to provide public comment.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, so, of course, in the state of California or anywhere in the world, we rely on our law enforcement. As my friends know, I respect and I appreciate law enforcement. I mean, if it weren't for your hard work and dedication and things that you do, it would be impossible to function. So for that, I thank you. And so I am a bit concerned. Oh, excuse me. With this implicit training, which is better than nothing, but I'm wondering if that should be an ongoing type of training, or something that could develop, or that could be measured in terms of outcome. And I would wonder if that training resulted in a change or behavior or realization or that sort of thing, and whether or not that was measured or studied. And if not, if the next training could be developed. As a member of the audience and as a member of the CMA and the Ethnic Medical Organization section, I do have a few concerns. In fact, we are not all the same. We are not all the same. We are not all the same. We are a diverse state. We're a diverse group of doctors who grew up in the jungles of Vietnam, in the mountains of Afghanistan, in the hood, in the barrio. We are not all the same. And I wonder if perhaps this odd behavior that's reported, this difference of a doctor, is in fact just part of the diversity, part of the culture they grew up in, they came from, they studied in, they lived at. We are not all the same. We are not. And so I would, it's interesting, law enforcement certainly, when it comes to arresting criminals and that sort of thing, is very important, and so, but in terms of licensing physicians, I wonder if it's time to, again, as I had stated previously, to...
Please conclude.
Thank you. It would be very important and relevant. It is time to have our medical expert consultants have diversity, not just training, but diversity experience, and to have volunteered in diverse clinic, and that sort of thing. If you're using the same...
Dr. Ree, your time is up.
Okay. Thank you again.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments in the audience? Any comments on the phone?
Yes, one. Eric Andrus, your line is open now.
Hi, we need to hear from the Central Complaint Unit and your so-called experts who are closing complaints without investigation. My sister was killed by a doctor's actions and this board refused to investigate. That's why you now have to endure me at every meeting, and I'm not going anywhere. We have complaints filed from people who lost their arms and legs due to medical negligence, and this board closed their complaints. I'd love to show these two speakers the facts of our complaints that were closed and have them weigh in on whether they think they were closed legitimately. I can guarantee that they wouldn't. But the public has no appeals process, only the doctors who are protected by a doctor majority board. Question, why is there never an explanation when an accusation is dismissed or withdrawn? Is there a law that prevents the board from sharing that information with the public because it doesn't reflect an open government when you hide information? You pay these investigators a lot of money to investigate and come up with enough information to file the accusation to begin with, and then you dismiss them. There's a doctor I profiled on Twitter this past week, a Dr. Hossein Babali, who was sentenced to jail and to register as a sex offender, who appealed his case and a technicality got the case reversed. So the board dismissed the accusation. The court didn't say he wasn't guilty of sexual assault. The board just dropped the case, and his breeze profile is clear. No warning to consumers. You're allowing patients to see a sex offender as their doctor, but there's no explanation of the dismissal on his accusation to help the public understand what you're doing. You hide your protection of doctors way too much, and you're clearly not putting much trust in your investigators who find this information, and you just dismiss or withdraw the accusation without explanation. And before Carrie ka-chings with another $500, I'm out.
Okay. Thank you for your comment. Are there any other comments on the phone?
No, not on the phone.
Okay. Thank you again. We appreciate it. Moving on to agenda item 12, Vertical Enforcement Program Update from Health Quality Enforcement Section, Ms. Castro.
Good afternoon. I'd like to start off by congratulating the newly appointed board members and the newly reappointed board members. It's always a privilege to be able to represent you in everywhere, in every way, shape, or form. You're always at the foremost of our thoughts, especially with these meetings on a quarterly basis. And I thank you for always allowing us an opportunity to speak to you in this forum. I would like to also compliment I almost called her Miss Escat. I knew her as Julia Escat, but Supervising Investigator Guarino and Mark Gonzalez. I have the privilege of having been Julia Escat's first lead prosecutor in Valencia. And when she came to us, this was under Mike Brown, who we all very much miss. He is departed now. And from the get-go, we knew that this was going to be someone who was going to be such a great investigator, very thoughtful. And so it was a privilege to get to work with her. I also want to commend my colleagues for a very good presentation. I think that it is important for this board to understand, and it sounds like you do, that passion drives us when the salary and paycheck does not. And that applies to our staff at the Attorney General's office. And we too would welcome an opportunity to fill you in to the full board on the DAG's perspective on the filing of these accusations and the challenges that arise there, for the purposes of highlighting different potentials for resource allocation, and so you understand the rest of the process. These investigations don't exist in and of themselves. They exist also to lead to prosecutions that are quality, prosecutions that get it right, and that don't end up hopefully becoming withdrawn or dismissed. Sometimes they do become withdrawn or dismissed. Sometimes respondents do die, and other times the defense of the case is such that due process calls for the dismissal. And don't get me wrong, none of these decisions are ever taken lightly by any staff, because by the time we're taking that action or recommending it to be taken by our esteemed executive officer, we recognize all that work that was done as a team collectively, beginning at the investigative phase, concluding with a recommendation to Ms. Kirchmeier to sign an accusation that accuses a doctor and also puts the public on notice. And so I think one of the things about timelines is we see it as well. Our timeline is trying to get it right in as least amount of possible and to collect enough evidence to be able to present to the Attorney General's office a case that we believe we can win with a clear and convincing burden of proof to a reasonable certainty, just a shade below preponderance of the evidence. So the other thing that I think you should know is that our office at the Attorney General's office in HQE is very diverse. We're diverse in age, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation. I have to say that HQU also strives to have a very diverse workforce, and in particular, Dr. Gray, who was the medical consultant who was in Valencia and who I also had the privilege of working with, she is African American. And she does it because she likes the contribution to this mechanism. And medical consultants must be pretty much, and I can be corrected, active physicians. The retired physician doesn't really assist us very much on a medical consultant. We want to be able to have someone assessing this case with real active experience. And, you know, being a medical consultant is not going to pay the bills, and they too do it from a pro bono basis, almost as well. And as Julie Guarino pointed out, a lot of these cases are reviewed by experts, which lead and drive our considerations. And the most fun work that we do, I think, is on interim suspension orders, when we recognize that if we don't hurry up and file an interim suspension order, that future patients and prospective patients are going to be hurt. And it's always a race against time, and we definitely dig deep into that passion bucket and always come up with something. We haven't hit the empty. So we would be happy to make a full presentation to the medical board. In the past, we have presented to the enforcement committee, and we thank Dr. Yip for that. And I know that we have been invited to present on accusations at the next enforcement committee meeting, but we would welcome the opportunity to present just the steps in the administrative process. Ms. Lawson had made a point to say that she wanted to understand what that process is. And specifically, we would be very willing to come in and present to you in 2019. In 2019, what we will have done is been reporting for a second year on all the medical board cases, consistent with Business and Professions Code Section 312.2. On the point of timelines, we certainly believe that transparency assists the public to understand what those timelines are and how effective we are in prosecuting these cases. And by that point in 2019, we would have reported 2 years of fiscal year data for 16, 17, and 17, 18. We have already presented to various clients their data in their board meetings, so this would be something that I could do, but with the benefit of having at least 2 years of data. At the same time, the licensing section and myself, we presented at a work group meeting convened by DCA. So that's actually a very positive development. They are starting to hold quarterly licensing and enforcement work group meetings. We presented on July 9th, 2018. And because now we're being pretty much, we've been requested by the legislature, by law, to compile these statistics, it's been very interesting to have had a little bit more staff to be able to see what trends we see. And so licensing, my counterpart at the Attorney General's office, and ourselves, we represent all DCA, healing arts boards, and other consumer-oriented entities. But for the medical board in particular, the medical board has 3 different investigative models. You have your complaint investigation office. These are 8 headquarter-based, non-sworn, least technical types of investigations. You also have out-of-state discipline cases. Those are where doctors come in with discipline that's reported, usually through the National Practitioners Data Bank, and we pile on to whatever any other state did. Those are handoffs as well. All other cases for you in the statistics that are revealed in those reports are vertical enforcement cases. But while the statistics may say one thing and you report your own statistics, I wanted to make sure that one thing that we have seen in those statistics is that out of the 385 total accusation matters that we received from this board, 354 were vertical enforcement, so almost all. And in 17-18, that number, 464 accusation referrals total and 411 filed were VE cases. Now, I think that it's very easy to look at these numbers that you report in your enforcement items here and to say, well, from 15-16 to 17-18, they went from 215 filed accusations to 265. But one thing you need to understand is when your investigators are discussing investigations, one case can have 4 investigations in it. And when they finish another case on the same doctor, and if I already have on file through our staff an accusation, we're going to grab that case and pile it in. So in the amended accusations, you don't capture that. But that's all work that is making a more quality-driven prosecution that hopefully leads to the just result of either rehabilitation, and when inconsistent with public protection, they get a timeout through a revocation. So I think that it's also important to highlight that Ms. Sutton Willis, I think, was the one that said that, yes, the observation is we're even under very extreme pressures and very complex cases at a time of understaffing. Our workload has gone up, and it's been exacerbated by the death certificate cases. These are coming in hot and on fire. And these are some of the cases that are taking a lot of our energies, but we believe that those are among the most important cases because of the opioid epidemic. And Cures is doing their part. That's managed by the Attorney General's Office, and CDPH, and of course every single physician in the state of California is, if they're not aware of it, they are now. But since 1516, our office worked on 1,552 investigations. In the last year, in 1718, we actually billed to and worked at least 1,928 cases. And this is a consideration that you should think about when you're drafting budgets and thinking about how you're going to allocate your pie, because the work keeps coming in, as Ms. Guarino pointed out, and the passion is there. But at some point, we don't want to miss any case. We don't want to close a case that's meritorious or see it come in too late. And so on those death certificate cases, our main concern is statute of limitations on the case that came in. If we can explore cures and exploit it by, at least either A, figuring out if this was a one-off and it's only this patient, or if there are other concerns that are more recent, combining the two. And those two investigations would operate on separate tracks, but hopefully lead to the same result. And that is in the filing of a case as promptly as possible and where necessary, suspension. At the same time, we have had a lot of increases in civil cases, and that includes motions to quash subpoenas on your investigators, as well as subpoena enforcement cases. The amount of physicians that notwithstanding the expectations, don't want to come in to speak to the board through their investigators or to produce medical records, without which we cannot proceed whatsoever. We need medical records. Those are the lifeblood of any investigation. Our civil billings are about $1 million per year. And this type of work is given to our deputy attorney generals, who come into the vertical enforcement model in 3 succinct places: expert review and selection, subject interview, and ultimate decision-making. And our talented investigators collect the evidence that we need to consider and present to an expert. But our DAGs have about 40 investigations each. To that, we add about 20 administrative cases. These are accusations. We have 9 other clients, and we have about 5 assorted types of matters that our DAGs also handle, such as TROs, writs, and federal and state and civil litigation. So that is my vertical enforcement report, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Castro, for your update. Are there any questions by the members? Comments? Dr. Yip?
Thanks as always. Question, the Cures is under the roof of the AG's office. Right now, I can only check on the patient that I plan to write prescription, but not the other way around. I cannot put my name on it and see who are the patients who were probably accurately or falsely prescribed the controlled substance. Where are we now as far as going to that direction? That one day I can put my name on it every week and check who's using my name to write the controlled substance.
So the question, Dr. Yip, is you would like, as a physician, to know who is using your DEA certificate to prescribe, perhaps fraudulently. I think that is a very valid question, and it's not one that has not crossed our desk. It has crossed our desk. Not only have we seen fraud with the name of patients, but we've also seen disgruntled employees stealing script pads or getting access to another electronic means to fill prescriptions. We can certainly take that question back to Cures. Right now, you can only search back 1 year on a patient at the time you're prescribing. But there are a lot of tools in Cures. We recently had our Cures program present not only to the Attorney General's office, but to also to Ms. Kathleen Nichols' staff, the HQIU unit, on all the bells and whistles now available in Cures 2.0. Those include analytics, where not necessarily for the user who is prescribing, but certainly for the user that is investigating, law enforcement, or healthcare oversight, there are different analytical tools that will allow us to more easily identify prescribing patterns, grams, just the red flags that one would see in a patient that would still require inquiry. Somebody could certainly have bone cancer or have palliative care, very high degrees of pain, but at least would put doctors like you who are trying to do the right thing every day as best as you can in trusting your patient, but also being fully aware that this is a scourge in California. But I think that Cures would be more than willing to come in and do a presentation if they are asked, and Ms. Kirchmeier deals with Tina Ferralis and her staff over at Cures. And so I can certainly tell Tina that the doctors do have an interest in finding out their own Cures prescribing history under their DEA certificate or their name.
Ms. Kirchmeier has a couple.
So Dr. Yip, that's actually a bill right now that's going through the legislative process to allow the physicians to be able to pull their own cures. They haven't been able to in the past because DOJ took a stance that wasn't authorized by law, and they didn't want individuals to do that. And so a bill was actually sponsored and is going through the process. So by the end of the year, I'm pretty sure that bill will go through, and by the end of the year, you'll be able to do that come January 1.
Okay. Dr. Lewis?
Ms. Castro, have you found any fraudulent emails that have asked physicians for their personal data to update their cures?
Was not aware of that.
Okay, because I did my cures a couple weeks ago, and then I get another notice from DOJ Identity Manager and saying I have 3 more days to do it again. And I never know if these documents look official because they could be phishing for something. So,
The Cures actually has a phone number. I wish I had it on me. They actually have someone picking up the phone. That would be a fraudulent use of it if it's coming in suspicious, and we can certainly have you forward that email to our office, and they could look at the path and file
later
them.
on, maybe I'll show it to you sometime.
Yes, to see if it's authentic.
I just did my cures, and now it says I have 3 more days, and so that doesn't sound right. And I don't want to click on anything. It just asks me to change the password. Oh, is it? Okay. Oh, I put mine in here. I have the phone number.
Okay. Okay, great.
I'll have to look at it.
But that is a concern, because certainly we do not want unauthorized users either conducting research studies, which was one of the concerns, independent research, not allowed.
PayPal does this a lot. You always get PayPal messages. They're fraudulent. Okay, I'll call them.
Dr. Gananodev?
Ms. Castro, just like I asked HUIU, how and when can we get these timelines down? I mean, this is, last year I got enough questions from the legislators about the timelines, from the governor's office, and all of the above. So I sympathize what's happened with the caseload, complexity, all type of issues, but in the end, it's our responsibility to provide that discipline in time so that the bad doctors don't hurt any more patients, and the doctors who are off get off sooner than later. So either way, it has been bad to both. Number one is to the consumers, number two is to the physicians.
We work every day to strive to find efficiencies in every single process. Most recently, as an example, on the next of kin cases, these are the so-called death certificate cases. Ms. Kirchmeier has delegated concrete tasks to her staff such that these can be pre-done before they reach the field. That is very important, medical record procurement. However, there are always going to be challenges. And if you're looking at it as an average, might I encourage you to look at the mean and also one positive improvement in the reporting of statistics is by category. I think it's hard to say, well, what's the timeline? I can tell you that if anything is going to be transmitted to our office, it's automatically looking like it's going to be a case, and that's going to take always a little bit longer because it's complex. A case that is less complex, those are already taken out of the stream. So even though it looks like timelines may be increasing, conviction cases and simple 801 and 805 types cases can be and are basically investigated by non-sworn units. So the work that is going to the field no longer has that variety of an easy case and a hard case. They're all pretty challenging. At the same time, I don't know what the legislature is comparing this to. And I believe I said that at our last meeting. But encourage them to compare it to other DCA clients that have less complex cases, have cases that are where the respondent is not heavily funded because of income and has not hired an attorney. Because we deal with attorneys from the get-go appearing for the other side and sometimes trying to be overly helpful to their clients, either in resisting the requests of the medical board or in interjecting quite a bit in the scheduling of a subject interview, it elongates things. One thing that you could do is try to find ways to encourage respondents to be more cooperative. We have tried that many times to try and make it a little more obvious that when we want to get the physician side of the story, they should try to show up to their physician interview much quicker. But ultimately, we also don't want to get it wrong. We want to close meritorious cases as quickly as possible. But ultimately, it's the client, or at that stage of the game, which is Ms. Kirchmeier and Ms. Delp, her chief of enforcement, who are reviewing every single decision made by HQIU and HQE and deciding to close a case based on insufficient evidence or no medical violation, and also to transmit it to our office. So because there is basically a mechanism where everything that we did has to be reviewed, we also don't want to come to the table closing something just to have our clients say, well, what about this? Why didn't you ask this question? Or why didn't you go talk to the nurse who was in the operating room? We're trying our best to strike a balance between enough to file it and things that we can wait after we file to get, always. And I think that's always the discussion, and it's a sweet spot. It is exciting to see that with the staffing, I believe the HQIU should be fully staffed by December. We've been fully staffed this whole time, with the exception of retirements. And of course, people have babies, so sometimes they get to go off and do that, and then they come back. But I don't know how else to answer that. I think you have to discuss how you're comparing it to other agencies and what the board is doing right and continuing to find efficiencies. Ultimately, if you look at the administrative side of how we handle our office, I think that the 312.2 report that both licensing and the Attorney General's office are putting forth would be very helpful and illuminating. But please don't forget also that the Office of Administrative Hearings also has an obligation in the due process. And so if you wanted to have a full analysis of every step in the process that we control and look at that, maybe we could do that. But even trying to find a similar way of measuring things so we're all measuring the same thing in the same way might actually be a helpful exercise, and one that I think we're moving towards as the Attorney General collects years and years of data on how they measure things, and OAH is collecting years and years of reports on how they manage your hearings. And ultimately, I think everybody needs to come to the table and decide, what is the starting point? What does this mean? When does the case end? And what the categories are. So I know it's tough to see these timelines, especially if you're a patient who has put their trust in you for us to do something, but we're trying our best. And I appreciate the question, Dr. Ganado.
Yeah.
You're always very fair.
Yeah, thank you. Just to make sure that I think we as a board would actually love to see each timeline where there is a delay. You mentioned that, so I don't know, Kim, is it
There's
possible?
a lot of statistics actually within your report here that I can go over if you'd like.
It's in the report, right? I've seen
Yeah,
it in there.
it's in 10B has a lot of the statistics that kind of show like by case breakdown what Ms. Castro was talking about, as well as, which different timeline.
Just read it.
So I'm,
I saw it somewhere.
So when out of that, where is it? I went through breeze through, but where are the areas where we can make a significant improvement? That's what I'm looking for.
You're
Not
looking for
looking for
friction
just-
points.
I think right now the biggest issue is that the investigation time takes so long because unfortunately the health quality investigation unit has been down staff. I mean, they've been for the last almost, Kathleen, I'd have to look at you, we've been 20% per probably almost 2 years right now. And so that time frame in investigation, that's where you see a lot of the delay. We've gone from 143 days, 143 days in the central complaint unit down to, I think it's down to 98 right now at this fiscal year is what we'll be reporting. So we're trying to cut corners there. But unfortunately, if you look at the case types, while we might have even a 98 day average for those complaints in the central complaint unit, the cases that are going out to the field, those are the high end of the average because those are the ones that take more work to then get it to investigation. And while your investigation time average right now is 505 days, that's the average. And so those cases, and if you look at those prescribing cases, that's where it's taken a long time. Now within that, if you ask Ms. Nichols and Mr. Loomis, when they come forward to talk about where they're seeing time delays, I'm pretty sure that they're going to tell you a lot of times it's in with getting the medical records, with setting up, and when I review these cases for closure right now, or to transmit them, a lot of the time is getting that interview scheduled with the physician because you have so many calendars that you're trying to put in. So, but I think right now the time frame, and to Ms. Castro's credit, the time frame for filing an accusation is probably the lowest that I've seen it probably since I've been at the board. They're down to 64 days, I believe.
Yes.
What was the last one for filing an accusation? And actually the time frame now on the other side of when the accusation is filed until a decision is reached is about 300 days, which is it's about a year from that time on average. And so right now, I think we need to get that investigation time frame down. But again, that goes back to them getting staff, and you'll be hearing from them in a moment. But that's really where the time frame delay, because if you look at the time from accusation to setting a hearing, if OAH isn't setting it out for 6 months, you're always going to have at least a starting point, 6 months probably for the case to get finalized.
That's right. And I think that one thing that would benefit looking at these lines, Doctor, is even if we told you how much work we were doing in each of those years, I think it would bring it into perspective. Because at any single time on your caseload, they're not all brand new baby cases. They're on all different levels of maturity. And you're juggling in the air trying to address each case and have case reviews. Both of our staff members, HQIU and HQE, lead prosecutors are 10 HQIUs case reviews. We offer meaningful feedback at that level. HQE on a quarterly basis, the SDAGs are having quarterly case reviews. And I think we're striving very hard. And again, I mentioned it at the last medical board meeting. These are all calendar days. They're not actually working days. So when we're talking about a 63-day from acceptance of prosecution to pleading sent, that's actually working out to 45 working days, like if you were working Monday through Friday. And I think the same is true with HQIU. It's almost like you're thinking, okay, these investigators are working 365 days a year. Some of them are, and I'm sure Julie is one of them, but not all of them have to, nor should they. They need a good work-life balance. These are very, very tough cases, especially when we have to close them, and especially when our reviewing experts find no departures from the standard of care. That's very, very hard. because these investigators have discussed with the patient, sometimes our DAGs and sex abuse cases, and things where we really need to know what the patient told this doctor because it's relying on that oral history. It's very tough. It's a very tough job and it's very rewarding, and we all do our part. But we work so hard to try and make sure nothing lingers. We want to avoid patients seeing doctors that perhaps they should not see.
Thank you. Ms. Lawson?
I mean, I guess I think that we focus sometimes too much on these numbers. And in litigation matters or in investigations, two of the exact same cases could take 200, days difference to investigate. They could literally be the same type of case, and one could take 200 days longer than the other because of shenanigans, as you're referencing on one side. And so I think at the last meeting I made the comment that we need to just help the consumers and our board members better understand the process that each of these cases is working its way through. Because when you look at this spreadsheet of numbers, I mean, it's not very user-friendly to look at. And it doesn't tell a great story about the good work that all of our staff and the AG's office and everybody are doing collaboratively. So I just don't want us, I know the legislators focus on the numbers because that's what their staff members bring them, and they say, well, look, it's going up or going down, and that's a measure of, in theory, how well something's doing. But I don't think in these types of matters that necessarily being faster means a better job, and I want to make sure we communicate that also. I don't want to see our timeframes increase, and I do think that we have an obligation to the public to make sure, one, in the most egregious cases, that action is immediately taken, and then two, that these are done as expeditiously as possible, but in a way that leads to the best outcome as well.
And those points are all very well taken. On suspensions and restrictions of license, those are the most egregious cases, the ones that we're running into court to try and stop this doctor with OAH's help from practicing or at least obtaining restrictions. I think it's important for people to know what they get by all this waiting. You don't want a dismissal. You want a fully vetted case that allows the board to figure out whether they're going to rehabilitate this individual or not. I also think that we're not sometimes very focused on the results, and your annual report actually does an excellent job of documenting stipulated surrenders. It documents probation. I know it sometimes feels like we're not doing anything, but if you just look at what the results are and what you get at the end, I think that is a very important metric that you can use when next time you're challenged about the timelines. I would come back very proudly if I was any one of you and to say, but look, we filed 36 interim suspension orders, of which we were able to knock out 30 doctors. Look at all the stipulated surrenders we got because they dealt with our investigators and they dealt with the DAG in the investigation, and they want to stop dealing with you once you file the case, and they just surrender and they come back. So, but your annual report, right, Ms. Skorchmeyer, documents all that, and you can see that while timelines may be going up, those surrenders and those very public protective actions that you are signing off on all the time. Your work is not just on a quarterly basis. You are receiving proposed decisions, you're receiving stipulated decisions from us, and Ms. Kirchmeier manages our defaults. Those you don't see, but those are very rare. But we are even trying very hard to default physicians as fast as possible.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. Are there any additional, Dr. Lewis?
What's so funny?
Nothing.
It's okay. What Ms. Lawson was saying was like, I hadn't thought about it that way because we are so focused on number, and the outcome is what's important. You don't want to make a mistake and have it come back to haunt you. So I appreciate that. I apologize for any time I said, where's those numbers? They're too high. But also, we need to make sure that you do everything you can to be as most efficient, which you are, but you don't want to get it wrong. And the public needs to hear that, because we work for the doctors and we work for the public.
That's right.
You do, right?
That's right. Yes, as
Thank
do we.
you.
So no apologies necessary. That means you're doing your job and you do it very fairly.
Thank you, Ms.
Both about the
Castro.
timelines.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions from the members, comments?
I just wanted to make one comment. I can't let it go because it's not about a blame game. We need to make an improvement. This was the reason given by the legislature to move our employees off from our board to DCA. So these are serious issues. We understand what you're saying, all of you. I do. But we need to get there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any public comments from the audience? Ms. Reed, come on.
Sorry, I'm sitting over here, but can you use that one?
Yes, hello, Hannah Ree again. So I thank you so much. I feel really blessed that I showed up today and have you here, because now it helps me understand the process, but also how difficult your work is and how passionate it has to be to get through that day and then go home and make dinner and feed the dog and go back again. I understand that. But my concern is this. I'm wondering if you're too passionate. I'm wondering if, in fact, you're too passionate about prosecuting these cases. And what would be the outcome of it? Possibly violation of civil rights. And so my concern would be that maybe there's too much passion to get that case through, to get it on the books, get it into the courts, get it closed. But I wish I had even 5% of your passion. Most of the time I'm just trying to get by. But so I thank you. And then also having learned from your talk about these medical consultants, I'm wondering if it's time, or even if it occurs, that there's a possibility that we may need to address whether there's a conflict of interest for medical consultants investigating the patient that's the doctor in front of them, whether or not that medical consultant has a biased interest in prosecuting or investigating that physician. Whether or not that's done now, of course, I don't know, but it would be incumbent upon us to wonder and inquire and investigate and maybe require medical consultants who may have a possible bias of some sort against that physician to excuse themselves from that case. Because the outcome, and of course in the process, does the doctor that's being accused have a right to know who that medical consultant is, and then to be able to address that as well. Then the reason why that's important, of course, is because, for medical board members, it's incredible how hard you work and how much is put on you, and being sitting here in front of the public. And then to be sued yourself. We certainly don't want that with our medical board members, to go through that. And so I'm wondering if maybe somewhere in the process it is causing some type of issue and putting the medical board members...
Please conclude.
Yes, thank you. So thank you again for listening to me. And ma'am, thank you so much for your hard work. Really, thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional public comments from the audience? Are there any comments on the phone?
Yes, one. Eric Andrus, your line is open now.
There's a lot of echo going on. At the January 2017 meeting, Judge Feinstein, who recently resigned because she can quote, no longer continue to fulfill the important duties of a board member in a manner that meets the standards I set for myself, unquote, brought up a case she had just worked on where the DAG didn't file some information in a timely manner, and they had to dismiss the case because there was no evidence. Ms. Castro at the time said she was going to look into it. I'm wondering what she found out. Was Judge Feinstein right or wrong? Are our DAGs screwing things up on cases so at least some of them are being dismissed on technicalities? Did a consumer lose out on disciplining a doctor that harmed them because a DAG screwed up? To quote Judge Feinstein again, 550 days is a very old case. If it were a criminal case, it would be dismissed for violating speedy trial rights, unquote. I guess because we're just citizens being harmed by doctors, speedy trial rights don't apply to us. Also, you had a hearing this morning for a Dr. Altchek. I found a news article that says his license was revoked in 1984 by this board, but that doesn't appear on his Breeze profile. Why not? Don't you think consumers have a right to know that his killing of a patient led to his revocation at one point? Remember, this board was caught by whistleblowers in 1993 literally throwing complaints in the trash. It's starting to look like it's happening again. A board whose income is derived from a doctor's license fees can't possibly be 100% impartial to disciplining its own members. It's impossible no matter what you all want to tell yourselves.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments on the phone? Let's move to agenda item 13, update from Ms. Castro again.
Yes, very briefly. I'd like to welcome Supervising Deputy Attorney General in Sacramento, Stephen Mooney. He has been here with me all of today, and he will be here tomorrow. He came to us from the Bureau of Medi-Cal Fraud and Elder Abuse. He is a career criminal prosecutor and is a very fine advocate, having actually trained investigators across the country and other fraud investigators and fraud prosecutors. We're very lucky that he is going to be leading our Sacramento team. And joining him is a new hire, Ryan Yates. He joins us from the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation, and he will be a new deputy. We have found that because of the caseloads in Sacramento, specifically, and in Fresno, that we have had to move some positions that we've had in other cities to that jurisdiction. We have not increased any of our staffing, at least since 2006, but we can still move positions around to where there is a need to assist with any efficiencies in filing cases. So we welcome Mr. Yates as well as new SDAG Stephen Mooney. And I conclude my report with that. And again, I want to close with congratulations to all you fine individuals who are reappointed and who recently got elected and who we consider a privilege to represent on a daily basis.
Thank you, Ms. Castro. We appreciate it. Are there any comments or questions from members? Ms. Wright?
Ms. Castro, I have a question for you. And this may just be a lawyer rant coming from me. Sometimes when we get cases, the expert report is sloppy, right? And I know that I've worked with experts that I end up retaining on cases that I have. So what is happening in HQIU to mitigate these issues with some of the expert reports, especially if the doctor that we're looking to discipline is kind of it's going to be based on what the expert is saying? I mean, it seems to me within the purview of your DAGs to be working with the experts with their reports and what it says and how substantive it is in terms of what they're analyzing and looking for. So what is happening on your end to sort of eliminate some of that issue?
We have a couple of ways that we address that particular issue. Of course, the first one is training. We have our Supervising Deputy Attorney General, Matt Davis. We also bring in a medical consultant, usually Ms. Classic, I forget what district office she's in, as well as an investigator. And they tag team to present, and obviously Ms. Kirchmeier as well. We rely on our experts to be able to sign up for a very minimal amount of money to review our cases. We do train them, but we do work with them in the vertical enforcement model to make sure that they're getting the correct types of evidence to consider in the case. And I should mention at this point that prior to the expert being selected, we are reviewing this list, selecting the peers, because the standard of care is driven by the community that our accused physician is a part of. So we want to make sure not only that it's the correct field of practice that can correctly assess what the applicable standard of care should have been there, and that's thoroughly vetted. And Ms. Kirchmeier puts in her report, or at least Ms. Delp does, how many experts we have in each field. We also, at that point, have a the investigator actually does this to make sure there's no conflict or bias from the get-go. Do you know this person? Here's, who it is.
I mean the substance of the report.
Right.
Yeah.
And so ultimately, lawyers like to say, well, I became a lawyer because I don't like numbers. I'm pretty convinced that some doctors became doctors because they didn't want to write. And it's very hard to do this. And we don't readily give up on our experts that can't write. And we always avail ourselves, Ms. Wright, of the ability to get on the phone and figure out if it's something that is just a question. And our investigators are talented in that regard, and working with the DAG, we can try and figure out what they meant and demand a supplemental report. Other times, what their opinion is, even the best written opinion can sometimes be shaken upon a defense expert report as well. So it's not necessarily that there wasn't thought put into it, and we can deal with perhaps a lack of grammatical correctness, but they have to get it right. They can't say, oh, this is a serious violation or this is a no-no. It has to follow a very technical term by law, grossly negligent, simple negligence, and they use the terminology of, extreme departure from the standard of care, simple departure from the standard of care, and then we also have repeated negligent acts. And these are all codified in Business and Professions Code Section 2334. But yes, not only do we live and die by the medical record procurement and also getting the subject's side of the story, but the expert review, which is independent. They are not a member of our team. They are outside reviewers, and it's a training issue. And I don't think we easily give up once we find a very good expert who's willing to help us. Ms. Kirchmeier, I give you the...
Well, I just think it's important, and this is something that you can speak to Ms. Castro as well as I think Ms. Nichols and Ms. Delp even regarding when they get that report, and if they have an issue with that report, there is a process where they go back to the expert and notify them of the writing of the expert report. We have two analysts that work in our expert reviewer program. They give feedback to these individuals based on the information. I know since I've been actually reviewing the case closures, I've been writing back to the deputies and saying, okay, I'm looking at this expert reviewer report. This individual needs training. Can you please work with our two analysts to get back to this expert and explain how to write the report, what information they're supposed to put in, what information they're not supposed to put in. And then during the process, when it goes to prosecution, and this is where you'll have to fill in the gaps, Ms. Castro, is that they work with that expert at that point to give them feedback and to kind of talk to them about testifying, and then all of that information on that expert, how that expert did, how they testified, and all of that actually all goes into our database on that expert reviewer. So we know what kind of report they did, what kind of follow-up needs to be done, and that's something that our expert program is doing. And so I think it's important that you know that they do that behind the scenes as well.
Right. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from members of the board?
Just one brief comment. I think that all the board members should feel comfortable commenting if they think that there's a problem with the expert. And I've done that certain times. I said, well, Kim, or if it's appropriate, Carrie, what about what this expert did and blah, blah, blah. So I think it's important for us to bring that up.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments from board members? Okay, any comments from members of the audience? Could you have a seat up there? Thanks. Right where, yeah, it's all right.
Just want to reiterate again that certainly we all care about patient safety and about good record keeping and that sort of thing. But the concern is, again, when there's a bias that's maybe not checked or not realized until it's stated, things could go wrong, of course. And so to protect my board members, my California medical board members, it's going to be important to probably continue to address the statements that I had made before. So,
Thank you. Any other comments from members of the audience? Any comments from members on the people on the phone?
No, none at this time.
None? Seeing none? Okay. We're going to move on to agenda item 14, which is Vertical Enforcement Program update from the HQIU. Ms. Nichols and Mr. Loomis, thank you.
Good evening, Kathleen Nichols, Deputy Chief Health Quality Investigation Unit. I'm really glad that you got to hear from a couple of our investigators today, and I thank you for that opportunity. I'd also like to introduce to you Commander Mark Loomis. Mark is the commander over our Special Investigation and Training Unit, which we call SITU for HQIU. SITU is responsible for developing and implementing specialized training to HQIU investigators. Additionally, SITU is responsible for HQIU's Field Training Officer Program, which is a standardized training program for newly hired sworn investigators statewide. Mark has also been overseeing our non-sworn investigator pilot program. And Mark's going to be giving our HQIU update today, but before he does, I just wanted to comment briefly on a couple of the things that were brought up. The biggest issue facing our investigative unit at this time, believe it or not, is not going to be staffing, it's caseloads. So as we bring all the staff on board, we need to truly evaluate as the next year goes forward, do we have enough staff or does that need to be augmented by staff given the caseloads? Some other state investigative agencies that are within Unit 7, which is the bargaining unit for our investigators, they cap their caseloads at 5 cases apiece. Another agency caps their cases at 10 cases apiece. And I think with the complexity of what we have involved here and the life and death nature of some of these cases, we really need to be mindful of what the appropriate caseload is for an investigator as we move forward. Another thing that was mentioned was the medical consultant hours, and I wanted to point out that the medical consultant hours are not separately funded. They're funded through what they call a blanket in our budget. And over the last several years, we've been living off the vacancies. We had all the salary savings from the vacant positions. And now that we've filled all of our positions, it's created some emergent problems. And one of them is the medical consultant hours. So if nothing's done to assist in fixing the structure of how those medical consultants are, in the next couple weeks, we may have to reduce the medical consultant hours, cutting them in half of what they're working now. That would be catastrophic to timelines. We would lose medical consultants. So I know we're going to be working in the next few weeks with Kim and members of her staff. But as far as the question to what the board do could help, this is definitely something that we need some assistance with because it's critical to our timelines, to being able to have them properly review the cases so we don't add to the timeline delays. The other issue is what causes delays in our cases. Some of the biggest areas are scheduling the physician interviews. The law that's currently on the books only will discipline a physician if they repeatedly fail to show up for a mutually agreed interview. That law is worthless because the whole point is they don't agree to come in. So we definitely need some legislative tools to assist us with this. The other area we're seeing delays is with these very important impairment cases. When someone complains that a doctor is under the influence of drugs or alcohol, we can send an investigator out right away, and then we ask the physician for a sample, and they can tell us, no, please leave my office. There is nothing that requires them to give a sample. Now, as a peace officer, if someone believes that we may be under the influence and there's a reasonable suspicion, we have to give a sample. So that's something else legislatively to consider, because otherwise it seems horrible that the impairment cases have long timelines. If you look in the chart in that the B where all the enforcement statistics are, it's kind of shocking how long it's taking to investigate some of the impairment cases. Well, that's because if that physician says no to the sample, then there's all sorts of other investigative things that have to be done to even see if there's a way to salvage that case. So those are just a couple areas that I would mention, and now I will turn it over to Mark to give you our update today.
Good evening, everyone. I will give a brief update here. As of today, I am pleased to announce that HQIU is fully staffed with 77 investigator positions. 5 of these investigators have been given conditional job offers and are pending final clearance. We currently have 2 investigators attending the 6-month police academy, 2 more are scheduled to attend academy starting in August, and 10 more will start an academy in September. We look forward to all these investigators completing the academy and being trained through our FTO program. Full staffing will result in decreased caseloads and improved morale, in addition to assisting investigator retention for future recruitments. During this upcoming year, HQIU expects to make significant progress completing cases and reducing investigation timelines. At the July board meeting last year, HQIU had 29 investigator vacancies. We worked at great lengths to recruit, interview, select, and hire these investigators expeditiously and are focused on providing high-quality and timely investigations. HQIU investigators will also be receiving sexual misconduct investigation training in October, and we invited all HQE DAGs to attend as well. That concludes our update. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the members? Dr. Kraus?
You filled all the positions. Congratulations. What was the secret? Why were we unable to do that before?
I think the issue is with recruiting is we spent a lot of time putting out massive recruitment efforts. You know, it wasn't just the colleges, law enforcement, retirees, veterans group associations, getting ourselves out there, explaining what we do. And you can tell from the passion of the investigators that spoke today, what's been very successful is actually having some of our investigators talk to people. And once they figure out how meaningful the job is, it's something people are interested in. Now, the caseload issue is a problem for us. And so what I don't want to do is we've spent so much time finding this talent and getting them on board. Now is not the time to lose them. Now's the time to get refocused on improving timelines and actually keeping that staff, because it was a huge undertaking.
Yeah, well, congratulations on finding the right formula. Don't lose the formula.
Dr. Gananadev?
Ms. Nichols, yeah, it's great. You got staff filled. My concern is they might leave to go to easier agencies. Let me put it that way. So that's a big concern. We understand the caseloads, and I think your next step is to really see how we can cut the timeline down. You gave wonderful ideas. I think that's what we need to work on from our side. Our legislative staff and our board has to look at and say, you can't, a doctor can easily set up an interview within a certain period of time. You give him or her an option. I mean, there is no reason to postpone it or not answer it. I mean, these are all just delaying tactics. So these are the kind of things where we can work to help. What we ask you is keep those investigators, don't lose them, and if we cut down the timelines, maybe we can get you back into our fold.
And the other thing that we worked on as a pilot program was our non-sworn investigators. So while we were hiring all these sworn investigators, we hired non-sworn investigators. Those investigators turned out to be such a resource for us and in producing such high quality work. And unfortunately, now that we're filling up our vacancies, we have a lot of talented people that we're still trying to work things out. But another suggestion would be to really evaluate that program was such a success and there's so much workload, it might make sense in the future to expand that non-sworn unit at medical board, just so that the less serious cases aren't coming down to the field offices, because we're getting it all now. We're getting both, and as we have to lose those non-sworn staff, that's additional workload that's on us. And it worked out so well. The model might be a great success for the future permanently.
Any additional questions from members? Oh, yes.
Just two things from the members. First of all, Ms. Nichols is being very humble, because a lot of the reason that they have those positions filled is because she went to the leaders of the Department of Consumer Affairs and pushed for them to get their backgrounds done so much quicker. And so that was really to her credit. And I think that she needs to be thanked for that, because I know that that made a big difference, how long they're getting their psych evals done, their medicals, everything through SPB, as well as just the background investigation. So Kathleen, I think you're giving yourself shortness on that. So that's one thing. The other thing is that Ms. Nichols, and to her point about this special non-sworn unit, Ms. Nichols, just in all discussion that we have here, came to me earlier this year looking at a BCP for a budget change proposal or a request for additional investigative positions in this fiscal year for some type of non-sworn program. And at that time, I'm just thinking at this point, we didn't want to do it. I didn't want to do it at that point. And I know I've talked to Ms. Pines and Dr. Gonadev about this, just because we don't know where we are right now, because of that large vacancy rate that they had. And so looking at that, we need to wait till those investigators get filled. But then the problem is now we're running into them that they have to go to academy, and it's 6 months. And so that is another thing you have to look at and trying to define, because the workload from when we originally lost our investigators has actually gone down, and now it's growing again for them. What's causing the big problem with the caseload is that the pending is growing, because they're taking longer to close. And so that's something that we will definitely be looking at for next year, talking with Ms. Nichols. And then we threw them a curveball from the medical board side by throwing in 500, well, not 500 went to the field, but there's probably, I don't know, probably 250 right now, 300 of the death certificate cases. And as you heard, and as you can see in your packet, those are the most complex cases that they have, and they take the longest, all of those overprescribing cases. So that's another thing that we'll need to be looking at. We have a meeting this week with Dr. Yip coming up to meet with the AG's office and HQIU, but those cases, we need to consider looking at additional positions just for those types of cases to give into the field, so they have more investigator positions because of the complexity now that we've kicked over to them. So those are all things we need to think about in this next year as we start basically in probably about February or March of next year, looking at what are we going to do to assist the HQIU unit. So.
Okay, great. Are there any comments from the audience? Ms. Free?
Yes, thank you. So thank you so much for all your hard work. My question is, do the folks that you hired, or the investigators, do they undergo any type of like a diversity training or that sort of thing, or if it's even relevant? That would be my concern in the investigative process and determining the charges or that sort of thing, whether or not it's relevant or important at all to be trained in diversity.
You can give 3 minutes of public comment.
Yes, thank you. So not know exactly what their job is. In the investigative process, certainly when it comes to criminal acts and that sort of thing, it's pretty black and white whether or not someone committed a crime, I suppose. But in terms of licensing, in terms of whether or not someone's exhibiting certain behaviors or acting a certain way, I think it's relevant and important to understand their ethnicity, how they grew up, where they come from, that sort of thing. So it's just my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments in the audience? Are there any comments on the phone?
We do have one question from the phone. Eric Andrews, your line is open.
So comes the dawn. This was the best presentation yet. Thank you, Ms. Nichols, for being so straightforward with the real problems you're encountering. It's candor like that that we don't get from the board and staff that helps the public understand why we're not getting help from this board. So if you're having trouble keeping up with your caseloads, doesn't it then make sense that this board would need to close legitimate complaints so as to be able to keep up with the bare minimum, namely 4% of the 10,000 filed? If you weren't closing legitimate complaints, how could you possibly handle any more when you can't even handle what you have now? My sister was killed by a doctor and you chose to do nothing about it. But I see disciplines for doctors with very minor things they did wrong. Why? You can probably shove it through the system faster than you could have done with mine. How many of you want an appointment with the doctor who killed my sister? His breeze profile is clean, even though I have a malpractice settlement against him. And stop playing nice with accused doctors' calendars. When the court tells someone to be in court, they have to be there. If you don't have the ability for doctors, get it. A lot of us understand exactly how these cases are handled, and what we don't get is why you all aren't petitioning the legislature to help you streamline the process and make it more efficient and workable. You're too busy sitting on your hands and stroking each other. Good Lord. Come on, guys.
Thank you for your comment. Are there any additional comments on the phone?
No additional comments at this time.
Ms. Sutton-Willis?
Hi, I just had a question, just the follow-up question that Dr. Ree posed. I know that some members of the public actually do have that question. So I want to give you the opportunity to just talk about the training that occurs.
Our investigators do undergo diversity training, implicit bias training, and I'm going to turn it over to Mark to explain about, because this is his forte, all of the training that our investigators receive.
Well, all peace officers in the basic academy go through racial profile training. That's a mandatory training. It's also legislatively mandated that every few years we re-up that training. That is for as a peace officer. As for the department, we do the implicit bias training, and also on an annual basis we do discrimination training. That's through the Department of Consumer Affairs. So.
Okay. Thank you both for sharing your news today. It's good news. We appreciate it. Moving on to agenda item 15, update on the Physician Assistant Board. Ms. Kirschmeyer?
I'll be quick, and again, the reason I'm giving this is because we still don't have a board member appointed to the Physician Assistant Board, so I don't know, I haven't heard anything, so if any of you are willing to be on the Physician Assistant Board, I'd be more than happy to pass this off to one of you, so. Anyway, the Physician Assistant Board conducted its quarterly meeting in Sacramento on April 23rd, 2018, and will be conducting its next meeting in San Diego in August of 2018. It's going to be in conjunction with the California Academy of Physician Assistants yearly conference. The Physician Assistant Board decided to form a budget subcommittee with board member Xavier Martinez and Javier Esquivel Acosta, and those two individuals will be on that subcommittee. Board President Sachs stated that the American Academy of Physician Assistants announced that there was a congressman in Washington, D.C. who is introducing a bill that will allow physician assistants to be paid directly from Medicare. This is one of the components of the optimal team practice. The congressman noted that the physician assistant is the only provider who has been excluded from direct payment from Medicare. Mr. Sachs stated that the California Academy of Physician Assistants met last week with the California Medical Association in the interest of introducing this proposal and to determine the California Medical Association's viewpoint. The board adopted regulations in 1983 to address the fact that there were no accrediting bodies that specifically reviewed and accredited postgraduate physician assistant programs and provided requirements for a board-approved program. Since the adoption of these regulations, there are accrediting agencies now that review and accredit these programs, and those approvals are recognized by the board. Therefore, that board is no longer going to need for board review and approved training programs, and by extension, no longer will need to set forth the curriculum requirements for a program approved by the board. Ms. Forsyth and the Physician Assistant Board thank the Medical Board for the continued collaboration between the two boards. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ms. Kirschmeyer. Are there any questions or comments from the members? any questions or are there any public comments from members in the audience? Any comments from those on the phone?
No comments at this time.
Okay, great. Moving on to agenda item 16, update on the Health Professional Education Foundation, Dr. Hawkins and Ms. Lawson.
Would you like me to take it, Dr. Harkins?
Yes, I would. The only thing I'd like to say is on July 5th, I was sworn in as a second medical board member on the HPF board, and thank you, Christine.
Yes, and recognizing that we are now the only thing standing in between all of us and dinner, I'm going to be extremely brief. I'm going to refer you to, now I don't know what tab it is, tab 16. And I just want to note a couple of things. So one is that HPAF is going to be changing how it receives the monies that it is then able to grant out for loan repayment assistance, and that is kind of changing the mission and how the foundation board operates, and really what we need to do as board members as well. In part to a fundraising capacity and identifying opportunities for funds to come in. It is a nonprofit. It's a unique entity, as I think you all know, in the state of California. It's a nonprofit that sits within the state government. So it's a little bit confusing for family foundations and others as we go out and seek funds for this health professions loan repayment programs. Then just another example of need versus what we are actually able to award. In the 2017-18 cycle, there were 403 applications for the Stephen M. Thompson loan repayment program. 147 were ineligible. 256 of those 403 applications were scored, and of the 256 applications scored, only 44 physicians were awarded. So a total of approximately $3.5 million was awarded, but 44 out of 256 is a very low number, and there's obviously a tremendous need across the state for additional funds for these purposes. There is some legislation pending that would provide additional funding, but there's a tremendous need. And then I would just note that we launched, HPEF launched what it's calling an ambassador program, which takes former loan recipients and turns them into ambassadors for HPEF and for these loan repayment programs in general. Also looking to provide mentoring and networking just sort of across the various health professions. And I will say that the most gratifying work on HPEF for me, or most gratifying time at the meetings, is to hear from the former loan recipients. And at each meeting, there usually is one presentation from someone who's received it, and not only about sort of the circumstances that they came from, but also the circumstances that they're now working in and how they're helping Californians. So it's really a great board to serve on. Thank you for all for allowing me to serve on that board, and I'm glad Dr. Hawkins is there with me now as well.
Yes.
It's a good group of people.
Thank you both for joining that board. I know what it's like to be on a board where you're responsible for fundraising. It's really a big, it's a big deal. But in this case, it's very important. Yeah. Thank you. Are there any comments from the members? Okay. Any comments from the public in the audience? Any comments from the public on the phone?
No comments from the phone.
Okay. Well, we are now recessed until tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.